Good evening, everyone, to the Greytown Council Workshop of March 12th, 2024. I'll begin with roll call. Councillor Height.
Here.
Councillor Meany.
Present.
Councillor McGuire.
Present.
Councillor Gass.
Present.
And I am Councillor Chapel. We also are joined tonight by Town Manager Mike Foley, who's at the podium, and several staff members, as I'm very pleased to recognize that we are beginning a more formal budgeting process this evening. We're going to start tonight with a presentation by Town Manager Foley, what he's proposing for this FY24 fiscal year, or excuse me, FY25 fiscal year. And so I'll hand it off to you, Mike, to start.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, honorable councilors. My administration is pleased to present the proposed fiscal year 25 budget for your review and consideration. With this being mine and our finance director's first budget here in the town of Gray, we set some achievable goals that I had previously shared with the council at meetings that included financial accountability and sustainability and working to lay a foundation for the future. In response to not only these goals, but rising operating expenses for municipal operations and the increased needs of the town, along with improving operating revenue from major non-property tax sources, including revenue sharing and motor vehicle excise taxes, the proposed municipal budget is based on a current services scenario with minimal increases to support these critical goals. With limited new programs and new personnel for the upcoming fiscal year, we believe this responsible and responsive budget will be supported by the community. Included below in the document is an overview of the enclosed net taxes to be raised summary sheet. We continue to remain highly cognizant of the economic challenges facing many of our residents, homeowners, and businesses. Many businesses are still trying to navigate the long-term impacts of the pandemic and economic challenges. These challenges include a dramatically altered labor workforce, highly disrupted supply chains, major production troubles, and an uncertain economy. While individuals and families continue to be confronted with skyrocketing prices for housing, food, fuel, energy, and other essential products and services, we are confident this proposed budget won't be a burden to the community. There are 5 new positions in the proposed municipal budget, 2 of which will not begin until halfway through the fiscal year, and 2 are funded from other sources. However, average wage and market adjustments are provided for in the budget to help retain our current workforce and recruit vacant and future positions in a challenging labor market. Cumulatively, this budget invests approximately $500,000 in wages and benefits above current year funding levels, along with future policy changes to best support our workforce. Other cost increases include health insurance, utilities, workers' compensation insurance, general liability insurance, and trash disposal costs, to name a few. While the town's largest revenue sources now better reflect actuals for fiscal year 25 of $2.5 million in excise tax, approximately $1 million in revenue sharing, $185,000 in development fees, $315,000 in public safety fees, and $300,000 in general fund interest, robust growth has been achieved in several revenue categories, resulting in increases over current year revenue levels in these and other accounts. To further support a balanced municipal budget, use of fund balance also continues, but has been reduced by approximately $500,000 for a total of $1.4 million, which we plan to continue stepping down from in the future. Cumulatively, municipal expenditures are up 11.7%, or approximately $1.4 million over the current year, with total municipal revenues up 34%, or approximately $1 million. This yields an approximate 3.7%, or $233,573 net increase in the need for property taxes to fund the municipal portion of the budget. However, based upon Gray's current assessed valuation of approximately $1.33 billion, this translates to a responsible increase in the municipal portion of the 13 cents in the property tax rate, which is an increase of 2.6% above the current year. The school portion of the budget is currently unknown and has yet to be presented to the MSAD 15 school board. The estimated calculations we provided reflect an estimated increase in Gray's share of 3%, or $359,446 over current year funding levels. This translates to an increase in the school portion of the property tax rate of 17 cents, which would be 1.8% over the current year. We would like to underscore that these are conservative estimates, and we hope to have better data when the first draft of their budget is presented to the school board on March 20th, and they're joining us here at the town council on March 26th. The fiscal year 25 budget also contains an increase of 6.3% or $57,913 in the town's Cumberland County tax bill. This increase includes the additional payment of year 2 of 5 due to a shift in the county's fiscal year. Wages, benefits, and inflation in key areas such as utilities, standard goods also drove the increase on the county budget end as well. In summary, the combined estimated budget proposal for fiscal year 25 calls for property tax needs totaling $20,733,672, which is an increase of approximately 4.2% or $839,812 over the current year. Based on the town's current assessed valuation, this amount yields a projected property tax rate of $15.64 per $1,000 of assessed valuation, which is 46% or a 3% increase in the mill rate. We believe this is a responsible tax increase for the community. For the average assessed residential property valued at $350,000, this would result in an annual increase of $161.65. Please note the town is currently undergoing a revaluation, which will likely result in a changed mill rate, although total taxes paid will remain similar to the estimates. This budget also complies with the LD1 property tax levy limit and therefore does not require an override as has been required in years past. Investing in our municipal services and schools is important to the economic development of our community. For us to achieve the desired economic growth, new investments are necessary. At the same time, it is also important to have a stable property tax rate that residents and businesses can manage. We are confident this plan establishes sound fiscal policies for the current and future needs of the great community. We cannot expect our residents and businesses to absorb unmanageable increases in the property tax rate for any given year, as they have done in recent years, and we hope this year is welcome news. We greatly appreciate your support and confidence in our ability to properly balance our community's needs with its financial capacity. Budget review-related town council workshops begin this evening, both before and after the regular town council meeting, on Tuesday, March 19th, and again on Tuesday, March 26th, both before and after a regular town council meeting. The review sessions will take place in the town council chambers here, and we want to remind the public that they can come in person, watch online, or join the meeting remotely via Microsoft Teams to learn more. The fiscal year 25 budget warrants are scheduled for a public hearing and approval at the town council meeting on Tuesday, April 9th, with the referendum town meeting scheduled on Tuesday, June 11th. A town meeting is scheduled for the school department budget warrants on Thursday, May 16th at Gray New Gloucester High School, with a referendum on the school portion of the budget also scheduled for Tuesday, June 11th. We look forward to working with members of the town council, school department, and our residents and businesses to pass a balanced budget proposal for our community. With that, I'll go through some slides that have some more broken down detail of the budget figures that I reviewed in my budget message. As we outlined earlier in the year, the budget goals that we established are financial accountability and sustainability, and also laying the foundation for the future. With that, we've made significant changes in the budget that's presented to you versus previous year's budgets. We revised revenues based on actuals. It seemed as if the last few years, average revenues were budgeted based on average revenues which were budgeted, and not taking into account actual revenues that were taking place. So for instance, in fiscal year 23, you'll see on the revenues tab that motor vehicle excise tax exceeded its budget figure significantly, and we're on pace to exceed the fiscal year 24 budget estimates for motor vehicle excise tax by approximately $700,000 in this year alone, in the current fiscal year. And so those better reflect growth in revenues in the community, as I outlined. And we're also including in the budget a better way to budget with a budget program which is ClearGov, which has a $24,850 startup cost and a $19,000 cost annually currently. And that program will allow us to better manage the budget process and not use spreadsheets and paper budget books and things of that nature to be able to produce a budget. And I have a small video that I'm going to try and share that kind of explains in a nutshell what the ClearGov budget program does. And I would like to give credit to our finance director, Justine Hutchings, for doing a lot of extensive research on this program prior to my arrival, presented it to me immediately upon my arrival, and we worked very diligently to try to have it in effect for this budget cycle, but unfortunately they weren't able to make that possible. So we worked with what tools we currently had in place to get the budget to you as quickly as possible.
Processes that can take thousands of hours. Annual budgeting cycles are critical, time-sensitive processes that can take thousands of hours to manage and require input from dozens.
This might not work, so if we tested it earlier, it seemed to work all right, but now it didn't. So if folks want to use the link in the PDFs that I sent out, they will be able to watch that. But basically it explains some of the challenges in building a budget using Excel spreadsheets. It leaves a lot of room for human error, which we have experienced even in this budget we prepared for you and made some adjustments in the updated documents that I sent out today. And so those, hopefully we don't find any more of those, but given the fact that we're using formulas and human hands entering data, sometimes those errors happen. And that the Clearview budget process will give department heads a portal to input their budget, and then it allows us to review and bring it into the budget as a whole. It also provides web-based budgeting tools for the community to look at the budget and to drill down into great detail. What's budgeted helps us to forecast wages and things of that nature. And I envision in future years on election day having a TV with a computer at the polls where I can show people things that they want to know and ask about and inform people about the budget process along the way, even in the days and weeks and months before the budget vote, to be able to present to the community, to present to community groups and organizations, and kind of outline the budget in a much more visibly appealing way. So we hope the council will acknowledge that and see the benefits of that tool. We also created a new human resource and benefits budget that has all the benefits and payroll taxes. Benefits and payroll taxes aren't really anything an individual department head can control in their budget. So we tried to work to make department budgets with amounts that the department heads can actually control and affect, such as positions, supplies, equipment, things of that nature that they have in their budget. So we pulled all those figures out of all the budgets and put them in this budget as a gathering point for all those revenues that can be better, or all those expenses that can be better managed in that budget. We also combined big accounts like contingency and legal, which were spread all across the budget in different places, all into the administration budget. So those can be managed a lot better from the central administration standpoint. And there's some other accounts we moved, such as utilities, facilities related items. We moved all into the facilities department. IT related items like copiers, softwares, internets, telephones. We pulled those out of specific budgets and moved them all into the IT and communications budget because those are supported and help to be managed by those specific departments. So we hope that will be, and again, those are things that are hard for a department head, individual department head, to control in their specific department budgets. So we hope these will be some well-received changes. So some of the are the ways to obtain the goals that we had and some of the changes. We've developed a new economic development department which utilizes TIF funding to be able to fund that department. The town charter currently calls for an economic development director position to be appointed by the town council, but that's not a position that's been filled here in the town for a number of years. And so we hope with our work with the village transformation project and a lot of the various economic opportunities we have in the community, that an economic development director will be able to help move those things along and help us better focus on economic growth in the community to help ultimately absorb some of the increased expenses we will experience over time. The Economic Development Department also includes a project manager / town engineer, which will help us specifically to manage the village transformation project and all the various aspects associated with that, as well as some of the other town engineering responsibilities. And given its primary focus will be on project management and economic development activities, that's eligible to be funded within the economic development budget and therefore funded through tax increment financing. So I mentioned we combined facilities-related items. The other item we added was the recreation budget has been added to the general fund, and we'll explain that in more detail when we talk about the recreation budget in the future. But ultimately, the town, through various other departments and various things such as benefits and employment taxes, the general fund budget subsidizes the recreation department budget, and we want to make sure that that's properly reflected. We went through this similar exercise in Westbrook before I left a number of years ago, where some of the things were done as enterprise funds or special revenue funds, when truly at the end of the day, there's some subsidy associated. So we want the town and the residents to have full transparency on the recreation budget and see what the town ultimately subsidizes. And I think at the end of the day, the community will support that, but we just want to make sure that that's fully transparent. And I have some figures to kind of show that when we get to the recreation budget later in our review sessions. Also, we moved debt service to the general fund. Debt service is really an operating expense. It's an ongoing operating expense, and it's been included in the capital fund budget. And so we'll look to make that move out of the capital budget for debt service. And then again, I mentioned in my message that revaluation will reduce the tax rate. That's post-budget when the final tax commitment is made by the tax assessor after April 1st and between April 1st and when the tax bills go up. So some of future challenges that I just want to call to your attention as we consider this budget that we'll have to consider is law enforcement. I think I mentioned at a previous town council meeting that the town only has essentially 2.3 deputies that patrol the town, yet we have similar size population, similar calls for service, and similar types of calls for service that the town of Standish has, which will have 8 deputies as of this next fiscal year. And so we want to make sure that we responsibly consider those increases. In the meantime, I've worked with the Sheriff's Department to budget some money for special details, where when we have concerns of residents for specific traffic violations or any other concerns, that we have some funds available that we could ask the Sheriff's Department to see if they could schedule a deputy on overtime to work some of these details for us and to help address some of the concerns that residents have. Solid waste and recycling is going to continue to be a challenge with the extended producer responsibility, which is a state collecting essentially a fine or a fee from those who generate recyclable materials to help pay for the cost in processing those. We may need to consider how we handle our waste, specifically recycling, in the future. That may or may not involve changes at the transfer station and or potentially the exploration of curbside collection, which many of the smaller communities around are considering. And so those are future challenges. Specifically, we're probably going to have to take that up in next fiscal year budget. The water district will continue to also be a budget challenge. In some of the explorations that I've done with the Portland Water District, they've conducted some financial analysis, and it appears if we were able to ultimately work with the Portland Water District here in Gray, that it would result in a significant annual savings in our budget for the costs of things such as fire hydrants and regular water service. So that'll be something that we'll have to consider in the future. Auditing will also be something we're going to have to consider in the future. As the budgets and town grows, the audits become more complex. So we're going to have to ensure we have a competitive budget for auditing resources so we can secure the best auditor possible to help maintain order in the budget. or in the town's financials. And it's also important to Justine and I, our finance director, who are new here. We want to try to get a good baseline audit of information, as it'd be difficult for us to take responsibility for things that have happened in the past, and we want to be able to have a good baseline audit that we can work from and show you the growth and improvements that we'll be able to help make for the community in the years ahead. The continued challenges is fund balance. As I indicated, we've reduced that by approximately $500,000. The usage of fund balance using this year only $1.4 million to help step that down in the budget process. And so we are fairly confident, and I have a more detailed analysis about fund balance that I'll go over, but we're fairly confident in the fund balance figures from our fiscal year 22 audit, and as of right now, those are only the figures we have available, and we're confident that we'll see those improve, but those are the only figures that we have and what we feel comfortable working from. And then there's also, as you'll see when we go through the budget, there's a number of one-time expenses that weren't really capital expenses that we included in the annual operating budget that essentially will go away in future year budgets of approximately $225,000. So we are hopeful that that will help to give us a leg up on the future budget. And then LD1, which I mentioned in my message as well, is one of the challenges that the town has faced. There's currently efforts, Councilor Gass and some other communities, to have that law be changed at state government. We learned of some opposition today from one of the political parties, but we hope that ultimately the removal of that unenforced, unnecessary provision of state government, unfunded provision of state government, will ultimately be reconsidered and removed. But this budget does not, falls in line with the appropriate growth, and we're thankful we don't have to ask the town to overturn that. So here's the better fund balance analysis that I promised to share. And so according to our fiscal year 22 balance, our fiscal year 22 audit, our fund balance is $6,274,883, which essentially is 101% of the charter requirement. And so the charter requires us, the maximum amount to have is 3/12, or which is approximately 25% per charter, which is $1,559,253, which is 25% of the tax commitment. And the two top numbers that I have are the fiscal year 24 tax commitment and then the proposed fiscal year 25 tax commitment, both of which calculations would fall within that figure. But I wanted folks to be able to see how those changes. And so in fiscal year 23, the town transferred $835,000 out of fund balance for various items and or to balance the budget. And then in fiscal year 24, it was 1.9, a little over 1.9 million that was transferred, again, which was used to fund a number of items, and also 1.5 million of it was to offset the property tax rate. And so this year, we're proposing a transfer of 1.4 million, which we reduced by 537,000. So that, based on those calculations, that gives us a remaining $2,102,883, which ultimately puts us at 33% of the charter requirement. So we would still be over the charter requirement. And like I said, in some of my mentions of the motor vehicle excise tax being over-collected, we're also fairly confident that things in the last couple of fiscal years have been underspent. And so ultimately that would result in contributions to fund balance, but we don't have those calculations in the fiscal year 23 budget, and we won't have them for fiscal year 24 until sometime next year. And so we're confident that we can be at this figure, knowing that there's more fund balance to be reflected once we have proper audits, and we can utilize that a little bit and begin to step that down to help manage the budget's impact on the property tax rate. I think, just to go back on this slide, I think one of the things that has been concerning from what I've learned in at least the last budgetary process, there wasn't really confidence in what this number was, and so I'm hoping that this provides the council a little bit more confidence. We're not confident in what it is beyond fiscal year 22. we're confident it's going to be an improvement, but we just don't know what the number. So we are extremely confident in what fiscal year 22 is, and that's what we worked from in these figures. So just to kind of go over the fiscal year 25 estimated budget as a whole again, in these figures, the municipal general fund goes from $9,336,912 to $13,118,013. And as you'll see as these numbers shake out, which is a change of $3,781, $781,101, it looks like a 40% spending increase. People are like, this guy from out of town, he's crazy. He's spending all kinds of more money. We're spending more money, but this includes recreation being added to the general fund, which is an operation of nearly $600,000. It includes debt service being transferred out of capital into the general fund, and you'll see that reflected. And then it also is reflected on some of the new things that we're supporting that do have corresponding revenues associated with them that are reflected in the non-property tax revenues. So ultimately, it's not that much of an increase. So then you'll see for capital, the capital improvement program that the towns typically raise money for. In fiscal year 24, it was $2,720,556, which included debt service. And so this year, based on what we feel are long-term capital investments, we have a budget of $350,250, which is a significant reduction in about a little over $2 million, about $2.3 million, or 87% in that budget. The CIP will also include proposed bonding of a fire truck that the council's been made aware of over the years that's been needed. And given the continued increased rising costs in that, we'll talk about more, we want to try to get that in and get that ordered as soon as possible, also with a significant build time associated with it. So as you'll see, the TIF number grows from approximately 797,000 to approximately 980,000. That's a good number, though it's factored into the tax rate, but that shows we're seeing economic growth in our TIFs, and we hope to in future years with the addition of an economic development director and project manager that we'll be able to better reflect those numbers and see some growth to better support financial aspects of the town that are eligible through TIF funding. And so, as I said, I very conservatively estimated the school budget with a 3%. I'm a bit naive to think it'll be anywhere close to 3%, but I just wanted to show you a figure so you could see how it affects. So as if it's 5%, if it's 10%, you'll see how that shakes out in all the numbers. I've met with the superintendent, and he ensures me that the budget process will be much more smoother and easier on their end this year. And so we're hopeful that will reflect in a positive number there. And then the county increase from 918,000 to about 976,000, which is a 6.31% increase over last year. And that number, I've received note from the county manager. It's pretty much finalized, but the commissioners have not voted on the actual final budget yet. So there could be some minor tweaks to that budget as well before we're completed. So with that, it shows we had a total essentially budget of $25,754,315. That's now increased about $2 million to $27,765,541, or about 7.81%. What's good to see that is on the next page where we talk about property tax revenues is our non-property tax revenues are growing, and they're growing for some of the budgetary figures that I talked about earlier, which are better, more properly reflected, and we're seeing some growth in municipal revenue sharing. And so that also includes the non-property tax revenues, includes the approximately $600,000 in revenue, which offsets the recreation department and the associated expenses with that. So we've seen revenue growth from $4 million, non-property tax revenue growth of $4,987,698 to $6,991,869, or about $2 million in increase, which is a 40% change, almost equal to the 40% spending increases that we've seen. And then, as you'll see, municipal revenue sharing is was $980,000 last year, and a little over $1 million this year. Revenue sharing is another figure that, as the economy continues to improve, every time you see the state update their financial forecast and the governor's putting out supplemental budgets, that's good for us because the estimates usually are over collected based on what the estimates are. So we're actually on track to over collect municipal revenue sharing of the $980,000 because it's 5% of sales and income tax that the state collects, and as those numbers grow, so does our share based on that formula. And so we will see positive reflection in those figures as well. And then TIF is essentially a revenue or slash expense. It's complicated how it's calculated, but as I said, that grows and results in the figures that you see to total out. And so therefore, the estimated tax needs for the community, and this is a good reflection of basically we're growing the municipal budget at the rate of growth in the community and not faster than the rate of growth as it may have happened in previous years. I had a Southern Maine municipal managers meeting today, and managers are talking about tax increases of 10% and 12%, and even one said I think 15%. That I think Gray might have experienced that blip last year with some of the budget challenges that we hope to be able to better manage in the years ahead and grow with the growth of the community. And so this shows an estimated tax needs for municipal budget of last year being $6,237,013, increasing to $6,476,394, which is approximately a $240,000 change or 3.84%. As you'll see earlier, I reported some one-time expenses of over $200,000, so that will help to get us to a place next year where we have some room to grow in areas that we need without adversely affecting the property tax. And then TIF growth of $183,000 and the school growth of $359,000 with the county growth of $57,000 results in approximately $839,812 more that we need to raise from residents, which is about a 4.21%. Again, that's also supported by growth in the valuation, which is essentially new construction, houses and businesses and improvements that people are making to their properties. And you'll see that in the valuation data on the property tax calculation sheet that I show. We have a valuation growth of a little over 1%. And that's a very conservative forecast by our assessor. So here you'll see the tax rate calculations for fiscal year 24. The municipal portion of the tax rate goes from $4.75 to $4.88, which is about a 13-cent increase or a 2.7% in change. And then TIF, the TIF portion of the mill rate increases by 13 cents. And then the school portion of the mill rate, based on my very conservative estimates, is about 17 cents or 1.8%, with the county increasing 4 cents, bringing a total mill rate increase of 46 cents or $15.64 from 15-18 in fiscal year 24. With that, the average home assessed, and this is not market value, assessed at $350,000, which will change in revaluation, last year paid a property tax bill of $5,313. Will pay a property tax bill of approximately $5,475, which is about a $162 increase or 3% more than last year. Again, that's based on conservative school figures, so we know that will likely change. So here's the budget review schedule, which I won't go through in great detail, but we began it back on February 6th with a budget public input session, which I had been on board in time for to participate in to hear some priorities of the community. We delivered the budget, the complete budget, March 7th to the council ahead of the March 12th deadline by charter, which is 90 days prior to the referendum election. So we just barely got that under. I'm hopeful that next year, with more time to prepare in my position, that we will be able to hopefully present that to you a little bit more early. But I will caution folks that next year is a new state biennium budget, and any budget effects that affect municipalities, we may want to wait to have as much information of those effects as possible, but also comply with our budgetary deadline established by charter. And we have budget review sessions this evening, March 19th and March 26th, with on April 9th, we've scheduled a fiscal year 25 budget public hearing and approval of the warrants. And there's a deadline established by charter for that as well, which would be May 7th. And we've exceeded that by about a month. So that's good news. And then from April 10th to June 10th, it'll be the responsibility of me, our finance director, and staff to help educate the public on the budget. We'll work to develop a more detailed budgetary portion of our website with all the approved figures. We'll work to develop a flyer, I think, as you guys have done in years past, to get out to residents. We'll look to have the flyer and/or documentation posted here at Town Hall. We'll have condensed budgetary books available for residents and different places throughout the community to help best educate the community on the budget and its impact. And then, as I mentioned, the school budget town meeting is scheduled for May 16th, and then on June 11th, we have the referendum town meeting with fiscal year 25 budget warrant vote and the school budget validation, with the polls open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So with that, I'm going to go into if there's no questions about my general presentation, I can pause if councilors want. We'll go into the budget reviews schedule, which I'll go over revenues and then administration, and then we have some other departments to review for which we have some department heads here to help support. We then have a regular scheduled town council meeting at 7 that we can pause the budget workshop meetings wherever we're at and to do the council meeting, and then resume the budget workshops at the conclusion of the council meeting. And so, any questions on the general budget as a whole?
I just had one question
Yeah.
on a math figure, but I don't know, I can go after if anyone.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we've had several different versions, so I don't.
Yeah, I apologize.
No, that's okay. I just want to direct.
We won't have
people
that
right.
problem with ClearGov.
It was on page 11.
Okay.
And it's on the slide titled FY25 fund balance.
Yes.
You outline.
That one?
Yep. Oh, actually, no, sorry. You answered that question while you were talking, so let me skip to that.
This is you're talking about the workshop packet?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
workshop was packet page 11, but that
Yeah,
actually wasn't,
Yeah, so-
like I said, Mike answered my question. I was
Yeah.
just gonna, I was looking for a breakdown of those numbers a bit, and you.
Yeah, so
you
I
gave
also
them.
included in your packet,
Yeah.
it wasn't in, there's a reconciliation spreadsheet of the fund balance. So that's a little bit more clear to understand.
Okay.
Than the figures I tried to jam into a slide.
Right, so it's
Um,
actually, my question's actually on that page, the
Okay.
reconciliation
Yeah.
spreadsheet, where we talk about, the first part where we summarize the municipal tax needs. So we start with a general fund proposed balance for FY25 of $13,118,013.
Yeah,
And then we're adding on capital improvements. And then seemingly we would be deducting non-property tax revenues and municipal sharing revenue.
yeah, so when you look at the tax rate estimate, which is at, again, I apologize, we didn't have page numbers, but we've since added those. The tax rate estimate, if you subtract all those numbers that you were just mentioning, you get the municipal tax needs of $6,237,000 in last fiscal year, and then the number in fiscal year 25 of $6,476,000. That's what's called the municipal tax commitment.
Right, I understand
Yeah.
what they're supposed to
Okay.
signify. My question is more when I do the math, so you would take the general fund number, which is all our departments put together, plus the capital improvements, then you take out these revenues.
Yeah.
I'm not getting the same total. I'm getting $5,452,084, so that's why I'm on the municipal tax needs total. But perhaps I'm just doing the
On
math.
what, so
So,
this-
well,
Which slide which
So-
page are you on in
so
the,
it's
in
this-
the workshop?
so it's, let me go back to the packet. It's packet page 5.
Okay.
Although I know these numbers have been updated since what was posted in the packet.
Is it this, the estimated budget slide?
Net taxes to be raised.
I'm not looking at the slide, I was looking at the the spreadsheet, but
Yeah.
I know that you showed it in several places. What's the slide called that you're,
Is net taxes to be raised?
So the spreadsheet that I showed, net taxes to be raised, that doesn't add up right?
That's,
right,
This one
municipal
here?
tax needs. Not the total numbers, but
The municipal tax needs
just the
portion?
municipal tax needs, yeah. And perhaps it's my understanding you would subtract from the general fund plus the capital improvements totals, the non-property tax revenues and the municipal sharing revenues. Basically, what it's not including is I believe it's not including the municipal revenue sharing as a deduction.
Let me just see here, I had asked, I did it and then I asked folks to double check it for me, so maybe that got missed, so let me bring up the actual spreadsheet.
I mean, the good news is it would lower, it, maybe my math is incorrect and I could do it again.
what was the total you got, Christie? Was that
$5,452,084. And I don't want to derail this. We can certainly revisit the
No, I
numbers,
think
but.
it's critical to know.
Yeah, but,
Um,
so if I just do it quickly here, 13,118,013 plus the 350, 250.
Yeah,
the CIP.
I'll have to double check, like you said,
Okay.
we'll double check those, so apologize.
Yeah, that's
if-
fine. I just want
that's an
to,
error.
sometimes we.
If
you
it
know-
is an error, then it may result in a change, so.
Right, and again, I might just be subtracting things I shouldn't be, but I thought I understood what I was
Yeah, I don't know.
subtracting.
It's hard to do on the fly.
Yeah, I know, that's why I'm trying to
Okay.
do it.
So
Yeah, I just did it
is there
again.
any other questions on the budget as a whole?
No, so that you answered, my only other question, which I'm sure we'll address at a later meeting when we talk about CIP, is I'm just curious to know, aside from debt service, what's come out of our projections for CIP for FY25, but we can talk about that when we visit
Yeah.
CIP, so. Okay, Go ahead, Dan.
Just a quick one, Mike, and we don't have to get into it now. I'm just curious, the idea of using TIF money to fund positions is new for us.
Yeah,
And I'm not a TIF expert, but when the TIF runs out and that income or that tax money shows back up on the state's radar, at hopefully an increased value to cover what possibly could be a loss of revenue share.
yeah.
I just want to understand at some point, it feels like that TIF money goes away. So in the future, where does the money come from to fund that position? And then also, we've always, our tradition's been we think of TIF money as just basically construction money. So if we use TIF money for the positions, then there'll be less money available for our contributions to some of these projects. We don't have to get into it now, but it's just a new concept for me, and I just want to understand it better.
Yeah, no, I can just explain it quickly, if I may. The concept of funding positions in tax increment financing is done in municipalities all over the region. And so and it's something that we did in Westbrook, where I came from, and it helps to, we have an economic development budget much larger than the one I proposed here, and it helps to be able to use funds that aren't from the general property tax to fund positions that help to grow the TIF revenue and help to grow the general property tax. It's an eligible expense under Maine's TIF law. Economic development activities are outlined in all the 3 TIFs that Gray has. One of the great things about the 2 TIFs that are ending in the coming years, it's a concern that those would go away. I'll be proposing to extend those for 20 years under the new law that was established to help support the development of housing. Any TIF that's expiring within the law being approved last year, that's expiring within the next 10 years, is eligible to be expended extended for 20 years to support the growth and development of housing. I feel that will be a funding source that, one, we could establish to continue to support these positions for 2 decades, in addition to the village TIF, which has, I think, in excess of 2 decades left on it. Those funds will be eligible, but then we can utilize those funds to help with the establishment of sewer and water infrastructure to better support residential development in the community. And so that will be our number one funding source for sewer expansion in the community, to avoid that being funded through the property tax. And so I've done a quick forecast of those for the next decade without knowing what growth is going to happen in the community. I can forecast it to grow by 3% every year and see that we'll have enough money to continue to set aside for the Village Transformation Project. We'll have generate enough money to continue to set aside for sewer and water infrastructure and things of that nature. But those forecasts don't take into effect new growth and valuation that will actually happen during that time. And I'm fairly confident that we'll essentially have more resources to be able to fund that. And those positions that in this year will be a much smaller withdrawal from fund balance than you guys have had over the last few years. And that will help us to bring in people that can better manage the great work that we're doing in the Village Transformation Project. That I can't manage that entire project and also manage the town. And the existing staff that we have can't manage that project and also manage the town. So those resources, they can better manage those funds. And then in future years, we will know what funds we need to support those projects on a more regular basis.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Again, it's just, this is what we wanted, some new ideas, or to use to become aware of tools that are available that we don't know about. It's the value of the questions and the value of your answers is that anybody who's listening, or anybody that views our meeting here tonight, gets the benefit of your explanation. So, no, I think that it feels a bit like magic to me right now, but I'm not complaining about it.
It sometimes sounds too good to be true, but it's
Yeah,
true.
exactly, yeah.
Anyone else have questions? So in the interest of time, Mike, do you just want to move ahead to
Yeah.
departments? Okay.
Yeah, so the first one that we had on our schedule, I think I was going to talk about revenues. Schedule's in the front. Actually, no, that I had revenues second but I had those discussed at. I guess
I don't think we didn't
I
have
didn't put it-
revenues specifically on the agenda, but if
Oh,
you
I
wanna-
have
if
it
you
at the
wanna-
last hearing on the 26th.
Okay.
But I'll just quickly go over it in general, and maybe we can take it off on the 26th. But as I indicated in my memos, we combined a number of revenue groups to make it more easier to understand. We had development fees, public safety fees, and excise taxes better reflect actual revenue. Interest and general fund. We have a better investment strategy for the town for its unused funds, which didn't exist in years prior. And we had some growth in interest revenue in this current fiscal year that we don't have quite an accurate accounting of that will work to better reflect. So we have unanticipated revenues for this year. We estimate close to maybe $300,000. So with a better investment strategy, we hope to be able to support the growth in revenue that we've kind of outlined in the budget. We also, it's been raised to me as a concern both from finance and from council members, the tracking of the Blueberry Festival. So we've better, you'll see further down in the budget that we better accounted for expenses associated with the Blueberry Festival in the community services portion of the budget, which is where we'll charge staff, public safety folks, recreation staff, all those different things that go into supporting the Blueberry Festival. And because we're the fiscal agent for that festival, we better reflected the revenues to kind of match and offset that. And so we'll work with the Blueberry Festival in the future to have a better, more accurate accounting so we can reflect those. Also, the general assistance revenue is based upon 70% of budgeted expenditures. And that's the specific expenditures associated with general assistance, not the staff expenditures with that. And that also is reflected in at 70%, but there's legislation right now before the legislature to change that to 90%. It's not a huge figure for our budget impact, but it would be helpful for all municipalities in Maine if it could get to that. We also have the Betty and homestead exemption estimates to better reflect based on what the assessor sees. And then we record recreation revenue, which is no longer an enterprise fund, and a best estimate of what we'll see for revenues. And again, that's probably a conservative figure, so we hope that will be better than anticipated. And then under transfers, we reduce the use, we step down the use of fund balance, and also the TIF revenue to support economic development. And then we reflect a municipal revenue sharing increase. So that's the revenues in general. Summary, you can take a look at it in more detail, and those are numbers we can refine between now and the 26th and take a look at the formulas and make sure that everything is right. But if anyone had any specific questions about revenues right now, maybe that you don't want an answer for tonight, that I can try to make sure we have in time for the 26th.
Just a simple one, I'm sure I'll slap my forehead as soon as you answer it, but what does BETE stand for?
Business equipment tax exemption.
Thank you.
So businesses,
Yeah.
so businesses can
I
be
just didn't
exempt.
recognize the
The
acronym.
state reimburses us for that. So the assessor collects all that data, reflects it on the data that we report to the state, and then they reimburse us for that.
You know, other than to say that this is the most complete list of revenue I've ever seen.
It's true. It's true. It's all very well organized. Yeah.
And then I was just curious, what was it about the Northbrook TIF that made you decide to fund those positions from that?
It's the TIF that expires the soonest, and so
Okay.
we're required by TIF statute to have the funds expended. So that's where I started.
Yeah.
I left the other ones to kind of build up as resources for future expenditures. And where that one expires first, we'll get that drawn down, get it extended under the new program that we've talked about. As part of that effort, I've worked with the assessor, and we're going to go through an exercise to make sure TIF borders and everything are correct, because some of them split properties and things of that nature. So that's all allowable when you extend a TIF. And so we'll work with Alyssa Tibbetts, our town attorney, who's an expert bond counsel, or expert TIF attorney and bond counsel attorney, and she will help us get all that drafted. And we can bring that to you sooner rather than later, so that the council has the confidence that those revenues will exist in the decades to come.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. I'm not concerned that that's an issue, just trying to understand the thought process, so I know how it works, that's all.
Yeah, I actually had a kind of quick question about our TIFs also. Well, two questions. One, does this amount you're allocating from the Northbrook TIF cover anything beyond funding the positions in the Economic Development Department, or is that just solely for those purposes?
It doesn't, and one of the reasons I don't have that is because we don't have like a true accurate accounting of where funds and figures have gone that have been identified for those projects in years past.
Okay.
That we're working to try to account for. So I didn't want to bring forth the pretend accounting of what we think we're going to spend in the future until I have staff, economic development, and project management support staff to be like, okay, we're going to need $1 million for the village transformation project in fiscal year 27.
Okay.
Let's better plan those things out when we have people equipped to better plan.
Okay, well, you actually answered my second question, because
Okay.
I was wondering, because we did set aside funds for planning and stormwater modeling and things, and I know we need to account for those costs from the prior allocations, so it sounds like we will need to plan for those in the future.
Yeah, we're going to better
Yeah.
account for those and
Okay.
have a better balanced reflection in the months ahead. But our priority for the last month or so has been to get this document to
Okay,
you.
great, thank you.
Hence the need for an audit.
Yeah. Did anyone else have revenue questions?
I did have one more, what was it?
And we can, like I said, we can go over that again further on the
Yeah,
26th
Sure.
oh, wait,
when it's
Okay.
refined.
sure.
Great.
And if you have questions that you think of, don't hesitate to email them to me, and we'll get them onto a slide for that day to help better inform everybody about all of those. So then, under, so we'll transition to administration, if that's okay?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I also left off the agenda, but our clerk is here today, we'll also go over elections, if that's all right. I didn't have it on specifically on the agenda, but that's a smaller portion of our budget. But the administration budget includes the town manager, budgeted for next fiscal year at $117,035, which is a blend of a rate that changes at my annual anniversary. And then one of the unique things that I hadn't talked about yet with economic development is I've charged 25% of my salary to economic development because approximately 25% or more of my time I will work on economic development. And that's a process that we've done in Westbrook as well, and it's an eligible process for folks that are working on economic development. You'll see later in the communications and IT budget, I also allocated 50% of that position, and as Councilor Gass can attest to, communications department helps us significantly with the economic development activities that we have. And as we're able to grow TIF revenues and essentially grow our economic development activities, we'll look to try to cover more eligible expenses in there. But these were some of the ones that I thought were important to be able to shift out of the general fund. And so our finance director is funded at $90,000. One of the things that's part of the financial accountability and stability is a one-person finance department to help manage a $13 million budget is extremely inadequate. And as you'll see from previous audit results and our difficulties to be able to account for everything, there's literally just not enough time in the day for one person to be able to manage the finances of the town. To ensure more checks and balances, I'd love to have more than just one additional position, and to be fiscally responsible, we budgeted an accountant position for this year to add on at approximately $60,000. We feel that based on our market review that would be adequate, but it may or may not be, and we'll manage how we handle that into the next fiscal year.
Mike, a quick question on
Yeah.
that, just on that salary matter. Are these kind of fully loaded? Do they include benefits and things like that, or is this is
No,
just salary?
the benefits are in the
Okay,
HR
okay,
and benefits budget, yeah.
Okay.
And so one of the positions that we would consider in the future from a finance related is potentially a payroll / accounts payable clerk that would help where we do payroll every other week. We could have that person do accounts payable one week, payroll the other week, and kind of give us even more checks and balances, and have a higher level position like an accountant to help with reconciliations and research and all those things, while the finance director and I can work on more big picture items and general operation of the town. So we also reflect the town clerk's position at $80,000, the deputy town clerk position at $53,820, and then 2 assistant clerks at $44,187. We also had budgeted a clerk intern to do some vault work to help digitize vault documents that we have in the vault, and so we'll look to participate in some intern programs to help secure somebody for that in the upcoming fiscal year. We've also upgraded hourly employees here at Town Hall to a 37.5-hour work week to plan for our transition to a 4-day work week, which has been a desire of Town Hall staff for a number of years. And we are also an extreme minority in the region for municipal town halls or municipal offices that are on a 5-day work week. And I have more information on that on a future slide. But we've also found that we budget for 36 hours and folks punch in 10 minutes early, cashing out at the end of the day, or dealing with that last customer. Sometimes they're leaving 10, 15 minutes later. And so folks really average more than the 36 hours that we've been budgeting for, but it's been able to be absorbed in the budget with vacant positions. And so we put that to try to better account for. 37.5 hours is an average municipal work week for most municipalities in the area, though Town Hall might not be open 37.5 hours in the proposed schedule that I'll outline, but it'll be something that will help to get us more in line in there. So we budgeted for that. Also, for MMA, we've better reflected actual costs for dues. We also combined postage, advertising, legal, contingency, and office supplies for all departments here in Town Hall. You know, some people have their own paper budget and pencil budget and all that stuff. It doesn't make sense for us to be in the same building to have all those separate budgets. So we've combined all those. We increased professional services to support for some accounting work that we're going to be going through to help ensure, in addition to the increased audits, to help ensure our books are in order. We're going to begin that work actually this year using contingency funds within the budget to begin that work sooner rather than later. And then we hope to finish that work out into the next fiscal year when we hopefully bring on an accountant to be able to help support our finance department. We're estimating, we haven't got our general insurance figures yet, and we're estimating those at a 10% increase. And we've also, a desire of the town council, increased our volunteer recognition line to support some better gifts for all our great town volunteers, and hopefully some better events in the future. So that's kind of the administration budget in a nutshell. I have the clerk, our finance director here, who are encompassed in that general department. If anyone has any questions.
Go ahead, Dan.
I have a teeny question.
Yeah.
On their volunteer recognition, it was like a budget for like $2,500, I think. And I just want to make sure that includes the gifts, but also, does that include like facility rental and catering?
Yeah, so I think last year you had it at $1,500 primarily
Okay.
for an event.
Okay.
And I upped it to $2,500
Okay.
with the desire to support some better
All
gifts.
right, that sounds good.
This will be my first time exploring the market in here to help plan events. If we need more in the future, then we may have to do that, but I think that's money well spent.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, that kind of mirrors my question, which is that you reduced the administration contingency by $11,000 down from 61 to 50,000. I mean, clearly you do because you put 50 here, but do you feel like that's enough? I don't know how much we've used that contingency this year. I know we had a lot of overages with some legal matters and things we probably pulled from
Yeah,
it, but
we haven't had a lot of usage in contingency from what I've observed in
Okay.
previous years. So we combined them all. You know, there was a contingency in the council budget. There was a contingency in communications
Yeah.
and IT. We combined them all, tried to look at, to better reflect. In Westbrook, we had a $40,000 contingency. And we
Okay.
had a $50 million budget. So I think we can survive with a $50,000 contingency. And if we have an emergency or crisis, then we'll have to consider that.
Okay.
That if we have a real emergency or crisis, it's likely going to be more than $50,000.
right. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that you've adjusted the budgets in certain areas like legal to reflect what we're actually spending. So I think we would need to rely on contingency less
Yes,
often.
and I'm hopeful in the year ahead we'll have less of a legal expense
Yeah, that too.
as we clear up some outstanding legal matters.
And then just one little thing I noticed was the GP cog dues are noted as an increase of, it's only $520 here, but the executive committee is recommending that we for GP cog is recommending that we retain current rates this year at, I think it was $2.10 per capita, so I didn't know if that was reflecting.
They weren't properly budgeted in years
Okay,
past.
all right, so, good.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine then. I just want to make sure we had the correct figure there. Okay, that was all I had. Did anyone? No? Okay. Great.
Oh, wait, Dan, you have something?
Oh, Dan, you had
Yeah,
some.
just
Sorry,
real
I
quick.
missed your hand.
The manager's expense,
Yep.
I wasn't familiar with that account.
So that was one that existed. I think it's for like meeting expenses, things of that nature. And so we kept that at what it was at. This year so far, they've spent $447 out of it. But that's before my arrival. So I think that's for maybe small things the manager needs to purchase here and there that are outside of other budget accounts.
The contingency has been a really hard sell for us. Contingency funds are relatively new for us here in town. We split them out specifically to give, I think, the community some confidence in the fact as to where the money was gonna go. having it all in one pool kind of does away with that, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But how can you account for where that money's going if it's all in one account?
Well, I think at the end of the day, nothing should be spent out of that without my authorization. And so it won't be frivolous expenses by any means. And we can better account for it in the future and show you guys what departments or what items that are actually being spent out of that. It'll be my goal that we spend zero out of it every year. Because I want to have everything else properly budgeted. That's why I said we're going to do accounting support in contingency this year, but I budgeted for it next year. So I'm not going to have to use the contingency for that. And so I think that this will give me a sense of what we do in our first year. And to your point about contingency accounts being hard for people, I agree. And if I can feel confident in future budgets, I can reduce it even more.
I think people will be happy to hear you say that.
Yes.
Out loud. Thank you.
Anyone else for administration?
So I did
Okay.
want to quickly go over the talk about a 4-day work week. This is the first time it's been floated at the council, so we want to hear any feedback. But we're going to propose to change to a 4-day work week effective on May 6th. So that will give us approximately in excess of 30 days notice to notify residents of the change. And this will include departments here at Town Hall, administration, human resources, assessing, planning, code enforcement, communications, and IT. Currently, our hours are Monday through Wednesday, 8:30 to 4 p.m., one late day, Thursday, 8:30 to 6 p.m., and one really short day, 8:30 to 12 p.m. on Fridays. Having only worked a handful of those Fridays, it is really hard for us to get anything done. You get started on a project or a meeting, or you schedule a meeting or things like that, and the day's over. And it's not fair to most of our department heads. Most of them never leave at 12. And so they're working over and they're working extended hours. So in a way to help better manage everyone's schedules, we think eliminating that Friday short day will be well received by staff, allow us to better treat our employees, and hopefully well received by the public. Not a day goes by in the clerk's office where they hear from people saying, "Why are you guys open on Fridays? Like every other town hall in the area is either closed one day a week and only open 4 days." So the public is seeing that change has occurred, and we're in the extreme minority here. Before my arrival, the staff had done extensive amount of research on it and presented to me the details about it and how it can positively affect. And so we looked at some of our area neighbors, and based on some of the feedback that we heard from some of our area neighbors as well, that people like to see one late day, not really late day, but one late day and one early day, so that community members who can't get here during normal business hours have the chance to come in maybe on their way to work, or have the chance to come in after work, or if they work second shift, they can come in before those different hours. So the proposed hours we're proposing is Monday 8 to 5, which is a 9-hour day, Tuesday 8 to 6, which is a 10-hour day, which we want to have their late night be on Tuesdays to align with town council meetings. So that would allow staff and department heads easier time to stay and transition to a town council meeting that would happen later in the evening. We know that that's not the only meetings that happen in the town, but we felt like Tuesdays was a good night to be able to do that. And then the hours on Wednesday would be 8 to 5 for 9 hours, and on Thursday 7 to 3 for 8 hours, which keeps us open a total of 36 hours and gets us that early day on Thursday. It also leaves some room for growth, that since we're budgeted for 37 and a half hours, as we see we're able to better manage people's time and schedules, we could potentially extend the Thursday time frame to be longer than 3 p.m. to better support. But right now, that keeps us within the 36 hours that Town Hall is currently open right now. So it provides for later hours than now, 3 days, with an even later hours aligned with town council meetings on nights to make it easier for staff to attend meetings, and also for one early morning, as I explained. And then we'll also provide staff with flexible scheduling options for other meeting nights. So planning board meeting nights, zoning board meeting nights, allow staff the opportunity to flex their schedule to best support those without working extensive overtime. So some of the quick benefits, we've done a lot of local experience and research which suggests there's some benefits that exceed the costs associated with it. Potential benefits: improve job satisfaction, employee well-being, boost productivity during the hours that we're here, enhance employee recruitment and retention. We found that for recruitment for some of our lower level positions here at Town Hall, it's been hard because they say, why am I going to go work 5 days a week here when I can work 4 days a week at every other municipality all around us and a lot in southern Maine. So we feel like, and we've received that feedback in some of our job searches. It'll improve morale as well as environmental benefits. There's some drawbacks. Availability to staff, it's reduced by 1 day, but the hours are increased by the other days. It may cause some scheduling conflicts, may create stress for some, and may not work for everyone's schedule. That's why we're hoping to institute in future personnel policy revisions some flexible scheduling capabilities for staff who may have childcare needs or things of that nature to work around those different scheduling changes. Like I said, it's used by a lot of neighboring municipalities and been used by our Public Works Department, and it's very well received by that department. We're willing to explore it for other departments to see if it may be able to, not necessarily the facility only be open 4 days, but we could come up with a 4-day work week with overlapping schedules and things of that nature. Like I said, staff is very supportive, and there's also some potential utility savings for this building being closed 1 day a week. The heat can be turned down 1 day, and facility staff can better manage their schedule because it's one less day they need to clean and prepare this building for the public to come. So we feel like that will be helpful to them. So that's some of the things about the 4-day work week. Does anyone have any questions about that before we advance in our agenda? Yeah.
Is there any thoughts to being open 5 days a week, but just staggering people, staggering staff?
We've considered that. That's something that can be considered, but I think it'll be more difficult to manage because everyone works together so much here that, you know, if HR is working on Friday and I'm not working on Friday or vice versa, we do so much together every day. Finance, the same thing. It would be hard for us to get enough people aligned enough because we all support one another. I think that would work in other departments that don't rely upon each other as much. But we rely upon each other a lot, so I think it would be important that we have that continuity with everyone here together.
I don't have a question. I just want to say that I'm really supportive of this idea. I think it provides for a better work-life balance, and as you noted, there's a lot of other municipalities heading in a 4-day work week direction, and it helps us remain competitive in what's been a fairly challenging employment environment. So,
Yeah.
I guess I would like to voice my support also for a lot of different reasons, a lot of which you've talked about. And we'd like to explore expanding it to those that don't have it also, if possible.
yep.
Definitely. I know it doesn't require any specific action upon you guys, but wanted to make sure you and the public were aware of it, and we'll work to best educate the public in the coming weeks. Some of our employees already have the countdown of how many Fridays left that they need to work, so we're looking forward, and I think this will be well received for the staff. So our next budget, human resources, we're running a little bit behind schedule, so I apologize. We'll try to get to this budget if we can, and then maybe the communications IT budget, so those staff can go home. And then, actually, let's do elections next. Since I have that before we go to HR, so our clerk can go home if no one has any questions. So it's in the administration tab, which is tab 2. I don't know what page number it is in the digital one at the moment, so I apologize. So it's towards the end of administration. But the election budget is pretty straightforward. Let me skip ahead to that
It's
slide.
page 35, I think, in the budget book.
Okay, page 35 in
Yeah.
the budget book.
That's right.
And so the positions include election workers. I've increased that to give the clerk some leverage to potentially improve better pay to recruit election workers, and also potentially have some available election worker staff come in the days and weeks ahead of the election. When I first started serving in municipal government, elections were 2 to 3 week affairs. They are now 6 to 8 week affairs with the amount of absentee balloting that takes place and petitions that are circulated on a regular basis. So this will allow the clerk to have some flexibility to be able to bring some of those staff in. And so a lot of people do it as a community benefit, but we also need to have staff. It's also going to be my goal in the future to, when we have larger elections, to have it be essentially an all-hands-on-deck event. I spent most of the day at the elections this past last week to support the clerk in any way that I can. But I think we closed the clerk's office. It might be wise in some big elections to close the entire town hall and have the staff here at town hall help to support elections as it becomes more and more difficult to find election workers to take the entire day off. So that'll be something that we'll consider in the future. Otherwise, we increased office supply line to support needed equipment. So there's a formula of how many voting booths that we need to have based on registered voters, and so that's increasing to support what the formula calls for.
Is there any increased costs for it being a presidential election year? Is that reflected in these numbers?
So this year, we're having, in this past fiscal year, in the fiscal year we're in now, we're essentially having 3 elections.
Right.
Which we've budgeted for and been able to work within. As in the future, there'll only be 2 elections because it'll be November and June. There's
Right.
no March election.
Right.
So we wanted to go with the budget we have now to best reflect where things are going to lay, so I can get a better understanding, and then make sure we can budget more appropriately in the years ahead, knowing what we're going to spend at each election.
Okay, yeah, I know there's some variety there, some variability. Anyone have any questions?
Nope.
No? Okay,
Okay, you are okay to go if you'd like to go, Madam Clerk.
thanks, Britt.
Thanks, Bruce.
So, human resources, this department, it hasn't had its own departmental budget in the past. I think there was the start of trying to consider that in years past, but this includes the director at $90,277. Includes increased funding to support, under personnel development, support staff training. Also increased funding under employee recognition to support improved employee recognition. And then we, as I mentioned earlier in the budget, we combined benefits and employment taxes into one budget to help them be better reflected. Health insurance and workers' comp reflect an estimated increase of 10%, and we also include new positions. And then we also broke out the health reimbursement account for folks to see. That was kind of lumped in together, and I don't think that's appropriate from a transparency standpoint. And I think in years past, as you can see, the budget total was $891,000. I don't think it accurately reflected both premiums and health reimbursement accounts. And so we have built the budget based on actuals and estimates for vacant positions and new positions for benefits. And then we've estimated the health reimbursement account to be at approximately 30% of our full exposure, which is a little bit more than what we're averaging. And we hope to actually establish this as a reserve account, so that way, if we budget 170 and we only use 150, we can carry forward the 20,000 or keep it in a separate bank account, so that way we can manage the growth, and maybe eventually we get to a point where we're funding the reserve, the health reimbursement account reserve at, say, 50% of our max outlay, and we can stop there, or we can bring it all the way up to 100 to have our worst case scenario potentially budgeted for. The health insurance analysts and stuff don't suggest that you have to do the 100% outlay, because they usually are about 30% or less. But this will give us a better figure, so we'll be able to see what we do on an annual basis and plan for the future and be transparent about that. And so that's kind of the other thing that I'll call to your, did I have 2 slides on this now? I'll call to your attention is we combine the vacation accrual and sick accrual into an account called separation pay, which is essentially when someone separates from employment, it gives us a total figure to separate. I think that was a concern of a previous audit. And that we'll better manage that resource to reflect what we're doing and if we're averaging a lot less. But this is also kind of a contingency per se, that will help balance everything out if for some reason it wasn't used. So as I talked about, we grouped Social Security and Medicare, and then if folks don't know, effective January 1st, there's a new family and medical leave employment tax that the state is charging, that it's 1% of people's payroll, 1% of payroll, half of it is charged to the employee and half of it is charged to the employer. So employees beginning January 1st will see that, and so we budgeted a January 1st effective of that of an estimate of $11,000, almost $12,000 that essentially will double in next fiscal year to account for the whole fiscal year. In meetings with my colleagues in the profession, we are, the rulemaking process is happening in 2024. So how that's all handled may or may not change, but that's everyone's best guess. And municipal officials across the state have talked about this and are preparing for it in the municipal budget. So it's not a huge impact. And then I also broke out, we used to have a retirement line only. I broke out Mission Square and Main PERS. The Main PERS, Mission Square is essentially our 457 match for the town employees, and that goes on like a sliding scale that we'll be working to maybe update in our future personnel policy revisions. And then Main PERS reflects the Main Public Employment Retirement System, which is currently our fire department. Main PERS is also an hindrance to our recruitment efforts here at the town, because if someone is an experienced municipal employee in a lower level position and wants to maybe move here, it's something they have to change. And so we may explore in future budgets to see if that's something that we could potentially give people the option. In Westbrook, where I came from, people could either participate in the 457 or the Main PERS program. So we have to try to create some equity in those programs, but in future budgets, I'll work to better reflect that. But for now, you can see the estimated expenditures separated for each of those. And just so you know, the Mission Square one, the 457, is basically a max exposure estimate, where there's a sliding scale where if you contribute 3%, you get 5%, or I think if you contribute 3%, you get 3%. If you contribute 7%, it goes up to 7%. And so some people choose not to contribute as much, and so therefore that's our best guess or a worst case scenario for employees participating.
Matthew, you had
I just, a point of clarification. I'm sure this is what you meant, but what I heard, that Main PERS was a hindrance to recruitment, and I guess what I understood you were to be saying is the lack of Main PERS is a hindrance to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I apologize, I didn't word that correctly.
No, I might have heard it wrong,
And didn't we address this in the FY24 budget?
it just
For
for
the
fire.
fire.
We
Just
added
for
it for fire
firefighters.
rescue.
Yeah, and they're under a special plan,
Right.
which is much more costly. It's 25-year, 2/3, no minimum age retirement. But the regular, and I don't have the employer contribution percentages on the top of my head, but it's the regular, essentially employee, or for the regular plan, the regular Main PERS plan, the contribution is about a little over 9% for the employer share, and the employee share has a share as well. And so we would, like I said, we'd have to look to explore to create some equity in the plans offered, but give people the option to choose whichever they prefer. 457 is like a 401k to the public comparison, and Main PERS is kind of like a pension system. Defined pension system.
Yeah, defined benefit, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I just had one question on this HR, well, actually I had two, but you answered one of them. Under professional services, I just noticed your presentation amount is quite a bit different than what was requested. I'm just wondering what was eliminated there.
So they used to have under professional services, it's employee recognition was in there.
Oh, okay.
And so we moved it
You
to
took
employee
that out.
recognition.
I see.
And in the first one of the errors we found and why we shouldn't do budgets and spreadsheets was we had put in a formula that it made a negative figure when we were essentially subtracting the items from that we moved to employee recognition. So the first printout that I provided you showed a negative figure, and the revised printout that I shared with you today adjusted that.
Okay, yeah, thank you, that explains it, yeah. Anyone else? Yep, Dan?
Just the definition for HR supplies, how is that different from like office supplies or anything else? Supplies and
They
equipment.
were different. ID cards, and that equipment for that type of stuff. So that's why the amount was reduced, but it's not reduced completely because there was some specific HR expenditures.
Yeah, it looks to be new this year. Yep. So it must have been somewhere else before.
It must have been somewhere, I think.
Falls under admin otherwise.
Okay.
It fell under administration.
Right, this is a new department that we
Right.
didn't have, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So it looks like we should probably stop there. and
We can, yes.
Resume at the conclusion of our regularly scheduled council meeting. Do you want to pick up with economic development or communications and IT?
We'll do communications and IT first, so our communications IT director can go home.
Okay.
And then economic development, we can talk about, because that's just me.
Okay, sounds good. So we will adjourn our town council workshop at 7:00 PM. We were going to just take a 5-minute break before continuing with our regularly scheduled council meeting. So we'll see you back here at 7:05. All right, welcome back, everyone, as we resume the town council workshop of March 12th, 2024. I'm not going to do roll calls since we did that when we started the first half of this workshop at 5:30. So Mike, we left off, I think, at, we were going to move on to communications and IT.
Yeah, we'll do communications and IT first, so I can let Kyle go home.
Okay.
And if there's any specific questions for him, and then we can go back to economic development, and then we can run through the other ones that we have this evening. So the communications and IT budget has budgeted funds for the director, IT systems administrator, broadcaster, and a summer intern. That's typically, I think we've had it in the last fiscal year that we hope to include again through a program with University of Southern Maine. And so those funds are budgeted in there. And then as part of my efforts to more appropriately use tax increment financing fund, we've charged 50% of the director's position to the economic development, the proposed economic development department budget, which ultimately is funded through TIF. And that's an eligible expenditure as communications will be extensive and critically important in our efforts for economic development in the years to come, and is currently actively involved in the Village Transformation Project significantly. So there was a request for a digital media coordinator position to add to the department. We ultimately chose to put that off to a future year, so that requested position was cut. And then as we talked about in the beginning, IT-related budget items are combined here, such as telephone, internet, software, copiers, and printers. So it's hard to compare this budget year to year because it has a significant change, but because a lot of the changes were associated with a lot of those ones we added in. This budget did include some legal funding as well as a contingency fund that we moved out to the administration budget, and then also has some increased funds to support, improved computer hardware purchases, as well as software that we need. It'll be my goal long-term to include any hardware purchases for the town in the operating budget, as they're not necessarily long-term capital expenses. And so we'll be planning to include those in future budgets. So that is the communications and IT budget in a nutshell. One of the things I did want to mention about the director position, the position is upgraded, and also this budget reflects Kyle as currently our Freedom of Access officer. The current budget that we're in, we will be transitioning that role and responsibility over to the clerk's office, which is a typical responsibility of municipal clerks in Maine. And the IT department will still continue to support them in the IT-related Freedom of Access Act requests that would happen. And so that stipend isn't included in this budget, but will be included in the role and responsibility of the clerk. And that's something that the clerk is supportive of once we get the clerk's office fully staffed, which we're close to doing that. Otherwise, that's the communications and IT budget. Is there any questions? Kyle's also here to answer if there's anything specific that I can't answer.
Is the FOIA work stipend you just mentioned part of the full-time personnel line item, or is it under per diem, or where does that?
Yeah,
where
it
is
was
that?
under the full-time personnel
Okay.
line, but we removed it
Oh,
from
okay.
this budget.
Oh, it's just not in here.
It's
Okay,
not
sorry, I
reflected.
misunderstood.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions? Dan?
Last year, we talked about a cyber audit for
Oh,
the town, and I'm wondering, sort of where we are with that.
if you could just introduce yourself, Kyle.
Sure. Kyle Haduniak, the town's newly minted Director of Communications and IT. Thank you to Mike for making that happen so quickly. Yes, so it is still in the cards to get a cyber audit done. We are currently undergoing some progressive cybersecurity upgrades in-house, including 2FA, including some other upgrades on the back end that we're doing, and I want to complete those before we go ahead with the audit. We do have a firm picked out, and we have the funds set aside for it for this fiscal year. But we will get that done hopefully in the next couple months.
Great, thank you.
And just for the audience at home, 2FA is two-factor authentication.
Two-factor authentication.
Okay.
It helps make our technology and systems a lot more secure
Right.
than they otherwise be.
Yeah, I think most of us are familiar with it, just being users of every website out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Online banking.
Right.
And you're still gonna get your server room?
I hope so. If you go in there right now, it is a lot quieter. We just recently changed out a piece of equipment, and so you can actually hear the person you're talking with in that back room now, so that's
Oh,
great.
that's
Oh,
good.
that's
a great
nice.
upgrade.
Yeah.
Small steps.
Yes, small steps.
I had a question about the digital media coordinator that was cut from the budget and kind of what that was.
Sure.
for.
So when I first came on board with the town in September of 2021, I was the digital media coordinator. And that person is responsible for, what the title says, it's for managing all the website stuff, social media stuff, some graphic design stuff, a lot of stuff that I've been doing since I've been here. Now that I have assumed director responsibilities, there is a large body of work that one could argue, and I could argue it, that it could be split between two positions. We could have one position be the digital media coordinator, responsible for the less priority, kind of lower level digital media needs for the town, and then the director could be responsible for the high priority, higher level stuff. So certainly a case to be made, not a critical upgrade, like we were able to cut it without, too many tiers, but something we may want to keep in mind in the future.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
thanks. I just had a question about, I know we've moved all of our, and maybe Mike or Kyle can answer this. We moved all of our cell phone billing and telephones and internet usage out into this one department. I'm just wondering, overall, have you noticed, because it's not reflected in the spreadsheet because it wasn't there last year, but overall, is there any increases in those costs?
No, we didn't anticipate any
Okay.
significant increases in those, other than, average increases. We'll work now that they're all combined to better manage them. Some of them, I've learned aren't like on the same accounts, and
Right.
everyone has different accounts, so we'll be looking to try to refine that. As a municipal government, we also have access to FirstNet, which is a public safety telecommunications network, which was developed post 9/11, that our public safety folks have access to, and that it gives people that are on that network, it gives them priority access to cell phone data and telecommunications in the event of an emergency or an outage. It gives you priority over the average citizen. And so that might be something we want to explore, to have every municipal employee that does have a municipally paid for phone to be on that network, so we can have that priority access in the event of emergencies. And so some of them aren't on that plan. And it's also, that plan is much more affordable because it's subsidized by the government, by the federal government. Where I came from in Westbrook, we had the entire municipal phone workforce on that, and it's also accessible to public safety employees and their families on a separate account.
Oh, okay.
Separate, so.
All right, thank you. That's helpful. It's hard to capture in this spreadsheet, so it's just helpful to have that information. Anything else?
Nope.
Nope.
I did want to just quickly add the comments about the digital media coordinator position. One of the reasons, too, that we upgraded the salary for the permanent director position effective in the new budget was because Kyle is doing essentially more with less. As we continue to grow economic development activities, a digital media coordinator is ideally a position that could be ultimately funded 100% through economic development activities, because they would be helping us promote the town in the long term. And so as I talk about some of the stuff in the economic development budget, you'll see that there'll be some stuff that a person will need to manage in the future, and will need that position. It's just for now, we tried to do more with less.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Kyle, for sticking around.
Thanks.
Yes, good night.
Yeah. All right, so economic development was next?
Yeah, and that's back in tab, I'm not sure what page, but it's tab 4. We didn't have all the budgets necessarily in the order of the book, just because of staff that could come on various nights. And so,
Yeah, it's 43 in the electronic copy.
page 43 in the electronic copy, if anyone's following along. But so as we kind of talked about with the economic development department, which would be new for the community, kind of separate from any other department, it would include a director. We've estimated potentially at around $90,000, as well as a town engineer / project manager, estimated around $90,000, as well as 25% of the town manager's salary and 50% of the communications and IT director's salary. And so those are eligible funds for economic development activities. And this budget, total budget, also lines up with the revenue number that's being taken from the TIFs to support. The budget also, we estimated other operations things to support the new economic development operation. We have a member dues line item. There was a couple organizations, Grow Smart Maine and one other one that
Build Maine?
Build Maine,
yeah.
that the town had in the council portion of the budget. Will include those memberships in here, as well as the chamber membership. And so that's been moved out of community services into economic development. And so we'll see, once an economic development director gets settled, we might need more of those memberships in there. I'll be looking to have the town be part of the Maine Real Estate Development Association, a few of those things that those will need to be explored. And then we'll also be looking to, once an economic development director is in place, to have a Main Street program, which is a state-sponsored program to help support growth of downtowns. And with our efforts with the Village Transformation Project, this will be something that we'll want to take on as well. We've included under economic development, under village supplies, which is potentially some winter lighting to have during the holiday season, and some other activities in the village that are economic development related to help create a destination here in Gray Village throughout the winter season, and other events that happen. So we'll be using those funds for some of those items that our Public Works Department will support us on, hopefully erecting those. And then again, this department is fully funded with TIFs, and as I said, everything else is kind of a rough estimate to try to ensure that we have the resources available to support those departments.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this as a department and these positions, and the way you're funding them is certainly unique. It doesn't have a tax impact. So I know we had tossed around having the town engineer last year be kind of a co-position as a public works administrator, which always felt a little awkward to me. And so I think this makes a lot more sense, and it also allowed us to promote Tim after doing such great work for the last year and a half. So.
Yeah, if I may, just to that point, I didn't mention that. I found in my experience that having like an independent town engineer from these various departments, there's a lot of responsibilities for a town engineer, that managing personnel of other departments and things just adds to that. And with us exploring the possibility of sewer and improved water infrastructure, there'll be a lot of tasks that an engineer needs to do that they won't have to have the responsibility of a day-to-day department. They'll be able to help focus on those for us into the years ahead. And really, Councilor Ann Gass has done an outstanding job to help project manage the transformation project. But it's just not fair to her or the council as a whole to have her doing that. And so this person, we hope to take over that role and responsibility, so then we can continue to have her and others involved for more bigger picture public relations type items, rather than managing the project as a whole. And then someone can focus on, the grant opportunities, the managing of the TIF funds for other budgeted activities for the transformation project, and I think it'll be a much more well-run operation. That position specifically, we have funds available in the fiscal year 24 budget to support engineering activities. So if there's no objections to that position, we were going to work to develop a job description and begin the recruitment immediately for that position to hopefully have that brought on before the end of the fiscal year. The engineer position.
Yeah.
And so we think that would be a wise move.
Yeah, I think the sooner the better with that. I think, like you said, Anne's been doing a lot of heavy lifting, managing all of it with the MDOT in particular, and just working towards getting a raise grant federally. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Anyone else have thoughts on? No? Oh, Dan?
You have certainly filled our hopes, I think, as far as we are used to taking smaller steps. And I have to change my pedometer, I think, in order to keep up with you in the future, to take longer strides. The combination job for the engineer was definitely a halfway measure. It was an attempt for us to get our toe in the water. I think it does make sense, though, and I think it is more effective sometimes to just do it and move on rather than take those halfway steps. So I think that's a plus. I'm just curious, where are you getting your salary figures from? In the past, we've sort of used a group of communities that we've compared ourselves to when we do wage adjustments and stuff. And I was just wondering where you were getting your salary info from.
Yeah, so the Maine Municipal Association has a salary survey that can be sorted based on certain regional areas, counties, things of that nature, and those were our estimates, where we got a lot of our estimates. Larger municipalities certainly pay their engineers and economic development directors a lot more, but where we are a smaller municipality, we think that we can be attractive. I've already begun some recruitment efforts for the engineering position through some of my connections, and there's definitely some interested parties in the region that are excited about the opportunity and the cool things that are happening here. But yeah, that's where we get most of our data from, in those areas, and kind of tried to fit in a community of our size for those.
And I didn't expect anything less, but because they're round numbers and because you don't know, I think it's just good for the community to hear these just aren't Mike Foley's estimates. These are grounded in information that we get from other places.
And one of the things that I want to work on after we get through this budget, and John and I in HR want to work on, is we don't have like a wage scale that recognizes position levels and then years of service. And so we'll be working to develop a wage scale that creates pay equity across the board for various positions, and these positions can fit in there. We may be way off, and we'll have to adjust figures in the budget if we don't attract anyone. We'll probably post those both as a range of 80 to 90, and hopefully we can get a qualified person to fit in those if we don't. But our efforts to have updated personnel policies with changes to best support our employees, as well as a wage scale, will help in kind of having a real place where all these things kind of fit in.
Great, thanks.
Go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, I would just note that because I've had a little bit more of a window into the Village Transformation Project over the last months, it's really clear to me that this is big work and we need to resource it properly.
Yes.
And we haven't done that to date. And it's just going to be so much better for the town to have the skilled and knowledgeable staff devoted to that, not just to that work, but they'll do other stuff. But I think it's not just my self-interest. I mean, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to serve in that capacity. But it's been really clear to me that we need more horses, and we need some really skilled ones, and talented ones.
And with both of those positions, there'll be aspects of each of those that can take on responsibilities for the Village Transformation Project. Yeah. So it'll be a tremendous support system for the town.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, we've had our share of false starts, in the past. And one of the criticisms that we hear from people is that we have plans on the shelves that were never realized. And I think the resourcing is a big component of that.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
you know, some of the changes that you're making hopefully will, you know, help us break out of
Yeah.
that history.
Just a one follow-up. What does the reporting structure look like for this department? If the director and the engineer, project manager are making a similar salary, how does that work exactly? Are they
I
both
think we'll
reporting
have
to you?
We'll kind of, I think everybody will report to me. I think the whole department will,
Mhm.
per se, but we'll kind of have to refine that depending on the skills and abilities of people. We may not get an economic development director that's skilled in managing and supervising people. So we'll have to establish the reporting structure based on
Who you hire?
who we hire
Okay.
and what's best. So, but the economic development director does have, I'm not sure why this is, but it's a position that's requires confirmation of the council.
Okay.
I don't know why in the charter
Some
that
of
is.
some of them. are
So
different.
I've heard
I
some
could tell
history.
you over a beer, but.
Yeah, I heard some history about maybe why, but
Yeah.
we can, you know, and when we go through the hiring process for that, I'll plan to involve someone from the council in that hiring process to hopefully, you know, report out and support a candidate that I bring forward for
Okay.
appointment. or
Sounds good.
confirmation.
All right, thank you. So next up was community development, I think. Is that where you'd like to go, or?
Yeah, definitely. It's tab number 3, and so which includes the next 3 budgets of community development, assessing, and code enforcement. And they're pretty, community development specifically includes the director at $95,949, a planner at $78,014, and an administrative assistant at $45,955. This is, other than the changes that we made in FICA, Medicare, office supplies, postage, things of that nature, this is a pretty status quo budget. The one things, we did include some significant one-time expenses here, which you'll also see in code enforcement, which is document digitization for all planning files. And this is a one-time expense. And then comp plan implementation support, which is a $25,000 one-time expense. I think in the past, you guys have funded things like that under capital, but it's not really a capital expense, so we're proposing to fund it here. And then there's Presumpscot Regional Land Trust water testing of $10,000 that's funded under the professional services. Otherwise, it's a pretty status quo, and I didn't know if Doug had anything else to add. I think we covered most of it. Any questions about that one?
I did, or.
Go ahead.
So under the professional services line item, you mentioned comp plan implementation and document digitization as one-time services. However, I thought we funded at least the document digitization during the FY24 budget. I might be recalling that incorrectly, but I don't know.
I'm not aware of it.
No?
The
Okay.
staff got an estimate for me this year,
Okay.
and I don't think they had one from last.
Maybe they just proposed it as a future item. I just know it was a discussion item, so
Yeah.
perhaps we didn't.
Our code enforcement officer is actually the one that's been taking the lead on that project, to help with, you know, the time-consuming effort of, you know, searching for paper documents and things of that nature. And so that it made sense to have it done for both code enforcement and planning.
Okay.
All at the same time.
Sure, yeah, I thought it was, couldn't recall specifically, but I thought.
It's hard to make sense of some of the
Yeah.
other accounts and what's
Okay.
been budgeted for, so that's our next task
Right.
in my time here, to try to make sense of some of those things with our finance director. And if for some reason we find funds in the current fiscal year budget in the coming weeks, we can propose to reduce that.
Okay, yeah, like I said, I didn't have any paperwork to support my memory. I thought we had at least talked about it and potentially funded it, but perhaps we didn't.
I can't say that I remember we decided.
Okay, maybe it was just a conversation then. Okay, thank you. That was all I had on that. Dan, you said you had something?
Just, I might have missed it, Mike, how is the comp plan implementation a one-time?
Because Doug can best speak to his plan for that, but it's basically support for implementing some of the aspects, so people to support the planning office, but he can explain what his plan is.
So we are working this year, a big part of the comp plan implementation This current fiscal year has involved bringing on a GIS consultant to help with the mapping. There are other professional services related to that. The thinking here at this juncture is by the time we get to the end of FY25, that most of the heavy lifting, if you will, with regards to the rezoning, the new districts, the new standards and so forth, will be in place. And so at that point, we're in a more of a sustain mode, if you will.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah.
It does, thanks.
And I think the professional services line, though those are one-time expenses, I think we'll keep some of those amounts a little bit higher because I think there's a lot of specialty resources out there that we don't necessarily have an in-house staff. And with, bringing on an engineer, you bring on a skill set of a certain engineer they may not have every engineering skill set, and you might still need skill sets from another type of engineer or things of that nature. So we'll look to, potentially if there's aspects of the comp plan that haven't been completed, as Doug outlined, we'll keep some of that in there, but also look to keep this professional services line kind of strong for the support of some of the things that we're taking on.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, because I think there's issues like the Stillwater Pines CZA. I mean, clearly is another instance where the council, I guess, got ourselves in a pickle because we didn't have the resources to put in place the plan we should have put in place that would have prevented the questions that have come up now. So I think, having those resources available we have plenty of evidence in our past to show that we need them. I think the coordination and how our processes work and dovetail with that is something that will be interesting to talk about when we have a chance.
And this includes 10,000 for some of those one-off things, but like I said, we'll look to enhance it for the future.
Yep. Thank you.
Just, this isn't related to FY25, but just looking forward to FY26 in relation to the comp plan, we might want to consider any potential updates that are needed. I know that when I was serving on the steering committee, it was recommended that you revisit a comp plan every 5 years or so just to see if you need any updating. Not to repeal anything, but just you might need to make some minor changes that if you're not aligning with your goals. So.
Well, we have our comp plan coordinators too, so how that all figures into this is something we'll have to figure out, I think.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions on community development? No? Okay. Code enforcement?
Yeah, so our code enforcement officer is under the weather today, so I'll do my best to answer any questions. But much like the community development budget, this is a pretty status quo budget. It includes the code enforcement officer of $80,231. We have part-time assistant code enforcement officers, which totals $50,801, which is $50,801 and $45,698, and then administrative assistant of $44,187, and then this also includes some document digitization as well for $14,000. And then in our last budget, we purchased a vehicle to be shared with assessing and code enforcement. So between essentially 4 positions, and if you also want to loop in planning, sometimes the need for municipal vehicles to get out into the field is greater than what we have available. So we're going to explore, we've set aside some funds for some potential EV leases. There's a really good program through Efficiency Maine to support municipal governments that gets you into a municipal EV for a one-time cost of a 3-year lease. And then after the 3-year lease, you can plan to buy out the vehicle lease and maintain that as part of your municipal fleet. We took advantage of this program in Westbrook and were able to bring 4 EVs into the fleet in prior years, and now they allow for you to do 2 on an annual basis. So we're budgeting potentially, $4,000 to $5,000 of an expense per vehicle, which will give us a 3-year usage of that vehicle, and we can decide whether or not that's a best fit into our fleet and if we want to continue to keep it in our fleet. With the town's investment in electric vehicle chargers here at the complex, We feel like the EVs that are available, the lower level EVs, will support the ability for them to get around town on a daily basis while taking advantage of the vehicles and not use any fossil fuels.
So, I'm sorry, just I want to make sure I understand. So this is a program that allows you to have an upfront cost of $4,000 to $5,000 for each vehicle or
Yes,
two vehicles?
For each vehicle.
Okay.
Yeah, and we budgeted a total of 10, I believe it was 10,
I think it was 9,000 I'm seeing here for equipment.
yeah, 9,000. So we received, the original request was for 15 because we were unsure. We received some revised estimates
Okay.
from the dealership and the area dealership that specializes in that. There's programs through Efficiency Maine and Hyundai, which are fairly substantial. And they usually involve the Hyundai Ioniq, if you're familiar, which is a smaller electric vehicle that charges fast and has fairly decent range. And so it's hard with these positions because they're shared amongst all that department. I think in the future, I'd like to explore potentially trying to combine these department budgets into one because they really have a ton of overlapping services and resources. And then that will allow us to allow them to best support each other in the future. But we put that in the code budget because that's gonna be the most common, where they have 3 code enforcement officers. If they have to go to 3 different inspections all at the same time, it would be good for us to have potentially 3 vehicles available. And we can schedule the vehicles out so that if they need to be used for some staff to go to a training or for different things, they can best support the municipal staff here at that town hall.
Okay. Ann?
Yeah, can you just talk about, is having a municipal vehicle as opposed to just reimbursing somebody on a mileage basis for use of their private vehicle, can you just talk about the economics of that? And it's also just, in these days, just having an official vehicle show up in your yard as opposed to a private vehicle is easier for the staff?
Yeah, I think the mileage thing is complicated. I don't think all of our employees necessarily put in for mileage appropriately, and that's unfair to them. It's a complicated process and more difficult. And to your point about an official vehicle with municipal plates coming into your driveway, that is something that may be a challenge. I haven't experienced it yet using my vehicle that the council provides me a stipend for, but I'm sure it may or may not be a concern with folks if they're unsure who people are. And I think in the municipal vehicle that's identified is better well received. It also from a emission standpoint and liability standpoint, using EVs is just much better for the environment, for the community, and also for it kind of models what we feel as some of the important efforts that I think the Resiliency Committee will be tackling in the future. And also liability, it's never easy when an employee gets involved in an accident, when they're on company time, and things of that nature. It makes things really complicated.
Okay. Dan?
Yeah, one of the things we heard last year when we bought one of the vehicles we did was that code needs something other than a car because of the condition of the sites and things. So is a straight EV and certainly a small car like that really gonna be the right fit for that department?
Yeah, we, in speaking with our code enforcement officer, because we will have one, we can plan what needs to be. If someone's going to a muddy construction site, then taking the SUV versus the other vehicle. But there's a lot of inspections that code enforcement does that the standard EV can go to. We're not driving necessarily in snowy conditions, so we don't necessarily always need 4-wheel drive. So we'll have the resources to best manage how they are used. And we don't put a lot of miles on municipal EVs because of the close proximity to most of what we do. And so this one that we have now doesn't have a lot of mileage, and the programs working through Efficiency Maine and Hyundai are much easier, better to manage financially than that one where we had to borrow money for and things of that nature. So it'll be much more easier to manage in the future.
Good, thank you.
Just one thought about EVs. How many EVs will need to be plugged in to our chargers?
So
if we
I'll-
add to our fleet, because we only have 4 plugs out there
Yeah.
right now, and I do want to leave space for residents to use them also, so.
Once we do that, I'll be working to have staff best manage when things are plugged in. Right
Okay.
now, I think because people are unsure about it, it's plugged in all the time.
Right,
Personally, I don't think it needs to be.
Okay.
And so I think we'll best manage we'll best manage the vehicles of when they're plugged in and the timing of those to
Okay.
best make them available to members of the public.
right, okay, that's good to hear, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matthew?
Pardon me. My understanding is with EVs that it's actually advantageous to let them run down and not charge them all the way up, because that last 10% of charge is more, more expensive, more energy intensive. If you actually maintain the charge, like less than 100%, it's fine. Especially when all your trips are gonna be under 10 miles here,
It's better for the batteries.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And the one we have has a backup, it's a hybrid, so it has a backup gas engine, so it's not critical that it be plugged in all the time, especially the one we have. The other ones may be more critical, but I think we'll plan to have a schedule to plug them in and when they're charged, get them off the chargers so that they're available for the public.
I mean, unless you're planning a trip to Augusta, I can't see any reason to need a full charge on an EV for tooling around town.
Right, yeah.
I think range anxiety is a real thing, being an EV owner myself, and so folks have to get used to that, so we'll work on helping the staff get used to that.
Sure, yeah, I know it's an adjustment, and it's also, you were mentioning resiliency committee's priorities, but it's also a priority in the comp plan to transfer as many of our fleet vehicles over to, hybrid or EV models, so I'm happy to support that. Next up was assessing, I think.
Great, so that is in the same tab section. So this is fairly similar as a status quo budget, though we do have, let me get to that slide. We include the assessor position at $95,502, and we're proposing an upgraded deputy assessor position of $62,011. We had an assessing administrative assistant that's been very difficult to recruit for some of the items I think that we mentioned earlier, the 4-day work week, and things of that nature. But also, I think it's critical that we have someone in the absence of the assessor that has the ability to act as the assessor. And so that's the work that the assessor and I have done as part of this new deputy assessor position. We've refrained, since our recruitment efforts were unsuccessful with the other position, we've refrained from worked on the updated job description, but we've refrained from posting that position until we got the sense of the council. We have enough funds in the current budget to be able to hire the position at this higher level, and if there's no objections from the council on that upgraded position, we'll get that posted right away. It's also, like I said, my goal to have some of the departments in that area kind of work together. And so when there's like administrative functions that a higher level position can help, we'll have some of the administrative staff help with that. Code enforcement assistant has made themselves available to be able to help when assessing kind of has seasons where they get, the tax commitment, all the personal property declarations and things of that nature. So if we just adjust to support one another best during the seasons, then we don't necessarily need a specific administrative assistant for this department, and we feel like the deputy assessor position will be better equipped to, skill set wise, to support. The assessing profession is also like a shrinking profession, and so if we can use this as an opportunity to potentially grow and develop somebody here in the town, it's good succession planning for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also include revaluation in the budget, which is $160,000, and that was kind of in the CIP. There's a potential that it's been budgeted in years past. There was some sort of sinking fund established. We haven't been able to completely identify that in the current financial record-keeping system that we have. So if we're able to make sense of that, and we do have those funds available, we may be able to cut that. But because this is due at the end of this it's due at the beginning of next fiscal year when the reevaluation company will complete all that work. And so to ensure we had those funds available, we thought it was most appropriate to budget them now.
Is that the full revaluation or the equalization project? Because I know we were budgeting for both in CIP.
Yeah.
Lauren
Yeah,
can
yeah.
best speak to what it's for. But I believe it's for the full project.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Lauren Asselin, I'm the assessor. So we had the sinking fund for, originally it was for a full reval.
Right.
And due to market adjustments, we made the decision to do the equalization
Yep.
in advance
Right.
and then potentially push out the full reval
Mhm.
to somewhere in the 2030s. So yes and no to your question. We were
Okay.
budgeting for the full reval, but then we decided to take a different route
Right.
based on market.
So is this the equalization project then?
This is the
Okay.
equalization
Yeah.
project,
All right.
yes.
Okay.
So,
And are we still creating a sinking fund for that future reval in the 2030s or?
so we have taken that out, if I'm correct, we've taken it out for this year.
Okay,
With the addition of the deputy assessor, the need may be different because that position is able to do a lot of field work. And that will take care of a lot of the on-site inspections, which means we can push out even further a full reval, so.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. In regards to the deputy assessor, is that, Mike, you said that we had funds available to fund that in our FY24 budget? Is that,
We do.
okay. All right. Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
vacancies that we have.
Right, I know that
can
we
fund
haven't
it at
filled
the
the-
higher level.
Okay, because we're not filling the admin position, right, okay.
Yes, that's been empty, so those
Right.
funds are available, yeah, and they
And
will.
it'll take us 3 or 4 weeks to recruit and hire.
Sure.
So
At
we probably
least,
won't
yeah.
hire somebody until, I would say, May at the earliest.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm comfortable
sense.
with that,
Yeah.
certainly if it's budgeted, yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I second all that. I think that's, again, it's just another opportunity for us to do it this way. I think that the whole sinking fund conversation, I don't doubt that there are better, perhaps more correct ways to do it. One of the problems that we've had in the past is affording some of these larger projects. And so in saving for the future, we've created these funds and used CIP because of the carryover piece. We have had instances before where we've set aside money, but not carried it over appropriately, and so kind of lost that effort. I don't know what the best mechanism for doing that is, but I'm looking forward to learning. Because I think we will still need that. I mean, there are gonna be things that I don't think we'll necessarily be able to afford in 1 year, but we might be able to afford in 2 or 3.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll properly account for them. Because it's, sometimes there's things that can't be paid for all at once. So,
Yeah.
I'm all for the budgeting it when it's appropriate, when it's necessary, and avoiding debt when necessary as well, which I think many of us will agree on.
Well, I think it's one of the reasons why we have a fairly envious bond rating anyways, as a
Yes.
town.
Thank you, Lauren, for clarifying that question, I appreciate it, yeah.
Lauren, did you have any more stuff that you wanted to talk to them about?
I had prepared documentation, but,
About the deputy assessor position?
About the
Oh,
deputy
okay.
assessor. I did have handouts if you want. I had
Sure, yeah, we'll
written
do-
a letter.
Yeah, we'll
Sure.
certainly
As long
take
as
a
you
look.
did it all.
Yeah,
Get the
Absolutely.
benefit of it, yeah.
Yeah, I had written a letter explaining,
We weren't sure it'd be such a slam dunk.
yeah, we weren't sure, so I was prepared.
Yeah, that's good.
Always good to have more
Yeah.
information.
And,
Thank you.
if anybody asks us, it's good to have
Yes.
this back
Yes,
too.
Thanks,
the
Yeah.
background
It
is
has
really helpful.
salary information, where we got that from.
Thank you.
I can already imagine some of the phone calls.
Yeah.
Is there, I'm unfamiliar, is there like an undergrad course or a graduate course where you would draw from potential pool of candidates, or how would recruiting work for a deputy assessor?
So when Mike and I were working on the job description, one of the things that is a requirement is that the applicant has to either be currently certified as an assessor or be able to get their certification within 2 years.
Okay.
So the schooling for that is through the state, and they offer a lot of different programs. You can either do it on your own. They offer the CMA exam at least twice a year. They have property tax school where you can take classes, and currently there's a large group of assessors who are willing to assist. We have a listserv that we can put questions out, so the person that would apply would, yes, either be certified currently or be able to get certified within 2 years. So they're gonna have a background in it.
Okay, yeah, I just wasn't sure where
Yeah,
where people went, yeah, how they got to.
How do you become an assessor?
Right.
Yeah,
Once I'll throw it on the listserv, it gets out there, it's
Yeah.
quite a big pool,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
so, yes. So I'm looking
Great.
forward to it, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.
We'll get that position posted right away. We'll add that to the list of open positions. Okay, so after assessing, we
It
had.
was general assistance, but did we touch on that a little? We touched on it a little bit. I don't know if you want to go to the more
Yep, we can
detail.
go to it. Claire, who's also our planning assistant, oversees general assistance for us, and she's here. If anyone has any specific questions about it. She had prepared the budget in general, which I made some tweaks to, and it's under the same administration tab. And then if someone wants to help me with the digital page number.
Oh, I have it here. I just got it.
It's different.
33
I have 26.
is the digital. That's the
There's
packet.
a new one
Yeah.
we just did with page
Right.
numbers, so I apologize for that.
I don't know what.
We won't
I
have this
don't-
problem with ClearGov.
No, but
So general assistance includes the administrator position, or it's a stipend of $10,400. And again, these costs are under services of portion of the budget, are our best estimates based on historical community needs. And again, those are reimbursed from the state at 70%. This is a budget that really, it's your best guess, but the municipality is bound by law to provide these services, whether we have a budget for it or not. And so if we budget, you know, the amount that we budgeted of services for $48,000 and we spend $100,000, we have to provide it, we'll get reimbursed, and we'll just have to account for the municipal share in the balancing of our budget. We hope we never have this issue, but our friends and colleagues in Sanford recently had, I think, a $100,000 to $200,000 general assistance budget that's approaching $1.4 million. And so we have to best manage our resources and policies to ensure that we are in compliance with state law, so we get that 70% reimbursement. And as I mentioned, there is a bill before the legislature right now. It's at the Appropriations and Financial Affairs Committee to fund that at 90%, with the biggest beneficiaries of that are the large municipalities, such as Portland, but it would be a significant benefit to us as well if we were able to get that funded at 98%, so we know the town's share. The other part, I think there's some long-term plays to potentially support administrative funds for, you know, have the state support the share of the personnel that oversee this budget, and things of that nature, which doesn't exist today. And then some of the professional services are unique to this general assistance department and budget. And then we also hope the state is in process of developing a software system. Right now, if someone shows up here for general assistance and they say, yeah, I used to live in New Gloucester. Well, they show up here, you have to call New Gloucester to find out. Well, before New Gloucester, they could have been in Oxford, and they could have been in Wyndham or wherever. And so you have to basically call around based on information you know about the person, where the state's developing a single system where it'll say, okay, Mike Foley received general assistance in Gray for this amount, because there's caps on how much people are eligible for, but then he showed up in Westbrook asking for general assistance. They'd be able to see what Gray gave them and see what they would be eligible for. And so we'll look forward to having that system in place and in the future to best manage that. Claire, did you have anything else you wanted to add? No? So that's the general assistance budget in a nutshell.
Just noting where we're seeing costs so far in FY24. It looks like we went a little over on food, which is really an unfortunate situation for people that are in need of coming here to support their family, feeding their family. I see you increased the budget to 1,000. I'm just wondering, are we seeing an increased need in anything else? I mean, it doesn't look like those numbers are extravagant in any other categories, but I'm just wondering.
Hey, basically, the previous GA administrator didn't really give people vouchers for food very often. She'd always refer them to the food bank. And I found myself in some situations where I feel it's appropriate to give them the food vouchers. So that kind of immediately placed me over the budget.
Okay.
So I do foresee giving vouchers, periodically as needed. If someone, for instance, can't get to the food bank that week, or you never know if they're having some sort of issue and they can't get there.
Well, the
normally.
food bank is open very limited times, like Fridays,
Yeah.
once a month or something.
There's one open every Sunday, and then
Okay.
there's another one open twice a month.
Okay.
I definitely think that rental has been more than I ever witnessed, but I wasn't here very
Sure.
long. Before, it was just about a year witnessing, but yeah, I think definitely rentals have been,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah,
assistant was
I'm just
important,
asking because I
you
know there are trends in other municipalities, particularly around
Right.
housing and food. So I was noticing that food increased,
Yeah.
but housing didn't really seem to be. So just trying to keep abreast of that trend. So
Yeah. I think the 1,000 would definitely be a good amount for the food, considering I only have given the 389 so far, because of the food banks.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that background. Anne?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been helpful to hear this, because even though this isn't a huge portion of our budget, I mean, I think it's helpful for us to know when people are struggling, and kind of what the numbers look like. So I wonder if it might be, to me, I think this is largely invisible work that the town does, and it might be helpful to just, maybe once a year, it doesn't have to be frequent, just to get a report on just those, obviously you can't have any personal identifying information, but just like how many people got served, kind of what kinds of things do they need, and how does that compare year over year, to Krista's point, because when people are struggling, I think that's part of our job to know. It's just useful
Yeah, I
information.
remember Josh had mentioned that when he was interim manager that he wanted me to submit a report, but I wasn't sure if where I'm supposed to send that. But I do give a monthly report to DHHS.
Okay.
So it does break it out by category.
Yeah.
So I could always kind of forward that. It's anonymous, it doesn't have anyone's
Yeah.
names on it.
Yeah.
Something like that would be great, and the other staff also provide those kinds of reports to us, and
Yeah,
that would
they
be,
do.
that would be useful to know, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll work with Claire to have incorporate in the reporting that we
Yeah, that
do
would be
the
great.
monthly from the other departments. And where Claire is fairly newer to the role, and she's going through training to advance her skill sets. I think one of the things that I've observed in a larger municipality in the past that has a larger general assistance budget, they have found that people who show up in smaller towns get redirected out quite often, which is actually against the law. And so as to Claire's point about folks being redirected for food, if she works to provide them the services that they're eligible for, we might see ourselves expending more resources on this, but we'll make sure that we budget for that appropriately in the years ahead.
Right.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, I just want to say that I support providing those vouchers to
Yeah.
folks rather than just trying to push them off to some other resource. I totally support that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
The one blessing that we have is we don't have a hotel, so if there was, we don't have access to any emergency shelter, which is both a blessing and a curse. So if that saves us some costs, and we had the same issue in Westbrook, we didn't have a hotel willing to take, so that limits the emergency, I guess, rental costs significantly. But we'll work to best manage these in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, and the food bank folks do a lot for
They
the
do.
community. And that is all volunteer effort on their part, and it's definitely part of that safety net.
For sure, yeah, I wasn't knocking the food bank out, certainly,
No,
yeah,
I
there are certain.
didn't think anyone
yeah,
was,
yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah,
I'm
do a
glad
little
they're there.
PSA for them.
it's
Yeah.
it's a good point, it's a good
Yeah.
part of our safety.
Yeah.
But if someone shows up on Friday and they don't open till Monday,
Right,
they
Yeah.
need food.
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay, sorry, we went kind of sidetracked on that, but
No,
I
that-
think important to talk about.
Important discussion.
So council and boards, I don't know what page that was on. So,
So it's in tab 11, and so most of the items in here in this budget really kind of belonged within department-specific budgets, so we've kind of dispersed a lot of those expenses. So office supplies, things of that nature, postage, advertising. So everything for the zoning board of appeals fits under code enforcement, which is the department that supports that department. Planning board operations, and then Blueberry Festival operations, we move that to community services. Economic Development Committee, which I don't even know if I think there's maybe one or two people on it.
Yeah.
They haven't been overly active, but we basically put those funds under economic development. The open space related items, we've incorporated under planning, and resiliency expenses. We'll do our best to support them in specific budgets. But simply because this is a separate required action on the warrants for town council stipends, we thought it was best for this item to just be simply the town council stipends of the $10,500. So everything else has been dispersed to more appropriate areas within the budget.
I think that makes a lot of sense. One question I did have though, under planning board stipends, I noticed we decreased that to 1,000, I believe, or is that that's year to date, that's never mind. Are we maintaining that fund at 3,500 for those stipends?
Yeah, that was moved to
It's
the
just moved.
part-time
Okay.
positions in planning department.
Got it,
Community
okay.
development.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Dan.
yeah, I'm thinking I'm in the minority here, but I disagree with moving all these out. There are the council's committees. It's our responsibility to appoint the people, and I just think that, what was on the warrant was just the council's piece of it. But it sounds as like there's support for making
Well,
a
I mean,
change.
you only heard from me. I don't know how others feel. I mean, I could go either way, but whatever's going to be easier for accounting purposes. But I hear what you're saying, Dan, that they are the council appointed committees and we're in charge of overseeing them. But
Yeah, this doesn't change any of the authority, it just changed the accounting perspective. A lot of these changes we actually are making are simply accounting nightmares. And you'll see when we get to talk about public works, that's the biggest change that we've made. And so when a bill comes in for legal and literally the finance director or a future accountant has to look at every legal item and try to determine what budget it fits under on the legal bill. And what hours are associated with what and things of that nature. That's kind of cumbersome. The marketing expenses, we have, a marketing budget. The Blueberry Festival, again, those are more appropriate in other places. Office supplies, we've incorporated that. If the council needs equipment, supplies, we will provide all that. So it doesn't really change the oversight of those organizations. It just puts the budgets in more appropriate places to help with better accounting.
where did you move personnel development for counselors?
So we have a personal development under administration, so when you decide you want to go to a training or things of that nature, we will fund it in there, and we've made sure that is appropriate to have these amounts, and I think if counselors want more training, we need to beef up those amounts in the future to ensure that that's there. But it didn't make sense to have it all broken up into all these smaller budgets. It's consistent with the efforts we've done across the board to streamline accounting of everything.
How do other counselors feel about these edits?
I
I'm
agree
willing,
with Mike.
Marty agrees
Yeah.
with Mike.
I'm willing to defer to staff in terms of what works best for them. Because we still have oversight, we can still find the numbers. So I support Mike on this.
I'd agree.
Yeah, okay.
I read the room.
Yeah, already you did. Yeah, I just, I know we're not looking at trio reporting, which I'm grateful for overall. I like this much better, this format. But I did, one thing I am missing from the trio reports was that there was space for a notation under each line item, kind of specifying what certain things are. It might,
Yeah.
especially in relation to these items where they've been moved under staff into like other staff professional development, or when it might, counselors might pull from that bucket also. It might be helpful to note like how much is allocated for our purposes versus staff professional development.
Yeah, we knew that was a missing piece in the
Mhm.
budget reports. That's what we tried to accomplish with the slides.
Yeah,
that-
right, I
That go with
understand.
each thing. Like I've pointed out, this is kind of a transitional budget presentation. With the ClearGov, you'll literally be able to click on personnel development and you'll be able to see
Oh, okay.
each item. It'll be like, if you ever kind of use QuickBooks where you can dial down into transactions, it'll be a very user-friendly interface. And the great thing about ClearGov is when we build the budget in there, it interfaces with Trio. So when we get the budget built and finalized,
Right.
it automatically imports the budgetary figures into Trio for us.
Okay.
But it just allows for a much better visual presentation.
All right,
And
yeah.
you'll be able to dial down into the details.
Yeah, and I
by
mean, you
click
don't
of a
always,
mouse.
you don't always want that much detail, but if you have a question about it, it will be nice to be able to find it. So I think if we have a solution for that, that makes sense to me. Yeah. Dan, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I love the idea of ClearGov, don't misunderstand me, but I'm really struggling with the cost of it. I mean, it's $125,000 over 5 years, that's a lot of money. And I'm just struggling with that, we'll have to wait and see, but I just think that, there's, like, I took heating and I took postage, and I tried to go through this, for instance, and add up all of the reductions and all of the pluses, just trying to get a sense of, has postage gone up, or has postage gone down, or has legal gone up, or is, I can't tell from here what the overall changes are, because,
Well, I think you would be able to tell next year because the bucket, I think it's this transitional year that's
Yeah.
awkward, where you can't see the shift from one year to the next because we've moved everything into one bucket. But you would be able to see that.
yeah, and I
Next
mean,
year.
again, I admit to having PTSD from last year. But I feel a responsibility to be able to see that, and I'm struggling. I'm struggling with.
I'll just add with the cost for ClearGov, the time that Justine and I have spent to build this budget, the staff time that it would be saved, and that I can focus on more critical things in the town. Things in my first month or two here, or 6 weeks, have been neglected because I've had to try to focus on building this budget, and things will, in future budget seasons, we won't have to invest that time, and it'll be much more organized and much more transparent in the future. And you'll be able to see, we know that those budget lines you talked about are confusing, and it's really hard to have an apples to apples comparison in this transitional year. And that's why I wanted to get everything together, so then you will have an apples to apples comparison in the future of what we're spending on heating and utilities and postage and office supplies. You won't have to draw from 10 different places to figure that out. You'll have one place to see what we're spending that on in most cases. I agree it's a struggle. If I was in your seat, having sat in that seat before, it would be a struggle, but it's a transitional year, and we hope that you'll trust us this year to get a presentation that looks much better for in the future. And even if we don't use ClearGov, this model that we've structured, if we continue to use this model, it'll be much more informative.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, that's part of our problem, is every year we recreate the wheel, and we start over again. I understand the predicament that you and Justine are in. I'm not being insensitive to that, but I just find it difficult to believe that if we had a system in place that we used for more than 1 year in a row, we wouldn't have to pay $20,000 a year for something like ClearGov. But I could be wrong, and I read the room again, I'm in the minority there, so let's just move on.
I personally think that technology isn't always perfect, but there are some real benefits to using technology that's really crafted to the purpose, and which it seems like ClearGov is. And but I'm obviously not an expert on this, but I'm accepting that you're reasonable to have PTSD after last year, I think, and but also that we are in this kind of transitional year. If we can get the software and make sure we figure out how to work it, because that has been a problem in this town in the past. We've purchased software and sometimes hardware, or not just computer stuff, but other stuff that has
Not
sat
bad.
unused because for whatever reasons we haven't invested in the staff training or whatever to make sure that staff know how to use it. So I don't take the decision to spend that kind of money lightly, but I do see the opportunities for for greater efficiencies and streamlining and transparency, and those things all sound good to me.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think if you add up all the staff time and energy that's gone into making this budget readable from the our current systems, I think it would more than account for the cost of maintaining something in a software program that's meant to do exactly that. So,
Yeah. I think, there's the staff time too, but some of the descriptions of some of the, that I've gotten from some staff about the way they've had to do things, reminds me of, pre-computer days. I remember.
yeah.
I remember, it reminds me of things that I would have done and hated doing. So I think if the technology can make people's jobs more satisfying, there's, as well as saving staff time, you're saving, you're making people's work better and more, more endurable and less, just beat down, repetitive work. We're paying people, for their skills and their abilities, and to have them just sort of spend their time doing, repetitive manual things makes, the $25,000 a year, perhaps worth it.
Right. Yeah, and I think it was almost 25,000 up front, and then 19,000 going forward. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dan's estimate for 5 years was right.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Do some quick math.
It's definitely, we view it as around budget time having an additional position that we don't have to hire for.
Right. Okay. It sounds like you have a majority support with that.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
So we were on and it sounds like also we were most of us were in favor of the way you've adjusted how you account for the boards and committees expenses. So I think lastly we had community services.
Yes, we caught back up. So the community services budget includes various nonprofit organizations supported by the town. We moved the chamber membership out of this budget to economic development, and then also we did want to mention that there's some funds that are not requested from us. So if you look at the 12/31 actuals, we haven't actually expended a lot of these funds. We have actually expended the chamber one. So that's a change that I had sent out in an updated document. But some of them haven't been expended, and so we want to ensure that they are expended. If they don't get expended, we shouldn't chase these organizations around for the money. So they should be submitting an invoice to us for the requests. I'm not sure how the request gathering took place in the last year.
Yeah.
So I will work to refine this process in the years ahead. It wasn't something that I was able to dig into as part of this budget, so we kind of kept it as a status quo. We did add the Blueberry Festival in here, $15,000, just to kind of have a hole to fill for Blueberry Festival related expenses. They were kind of spread all over the budget, and there was some expenses here of $7,800 that had been spent in the last year. And the festival, it's my understanding, is growing every single year. So growing with that includes growth in revenues and also growth in expenditures. So we kind of offset them in the revenue budget and in the community services budget itself. But so in addition to that, we'll in the year ahead evaluate who requests money and who takes money and come forth with a proposal if we don't get requests in the future with those taken up. I've seen a lot of municipalities have some of these budgets and begin to phase them out over time because it is a complicated process for municipalities to be supporting nonprofit organizations. There's some that can speak to how they support the town and show data, and a lot of them can be like, oh, we provided $20,000 of services to the town residents for $1,000. In those cases, we can justify their support, but large organizations like the American Red Cross, I'm not sure our $250 annual contribution is making much of a dent.
Yeah.
So we could consider some cuts this year if you'd like, or we can try to have a better process in the future.
We kind of tried to touch on this last year because we talked about reaching out to each organization to get some sort of understanding of if they were even expecting our funds or I think we should probably go through it a little bit if we can this budget season to see if we can eliminate some of these because like you said, some of these are like the snowmobile club. I know they invoiced us seemingly this year, but I believe the G&G snowmobile club or was that the ATV club merged in? They merged into some other regional organization. So I guess maybe the snowmobile is still out operating, but.
And if you look in fiscal year 23, the actuals we put together, about 38,000 or close to 39,000 was expended. So it's more of the ones on the upper end of things. But if this year, whether or not they submitted requests or not, and then it's some of those lower level ones.
Are we only paying them out if they submit a request, or are we actively sending these checks?
I think that's what we should do. But if it's the council's desire that we just, when the budget's approved, the beginning of the fiscal year, we should get requests. So I don't know if the town received individual requests this year to include those in the budget.
It was what your prior, basically when the budget was passed, the town just sent checks.
Yeah. And so if we have a request from them, then we can do that. I don't think any requests exist for these funds to be included in this year's budget. There are some organizations I did hear from through these doors. They called me since I've been in office, so I confirmed with them. I talked to the chamber, but none of these other organizations have I heard from. I don't know if Josh had heard from them prior.
No.
If he hadn't, then we can work to. If we didn't get actually documented requests, then we can.
I don't think
eliminate
Nate
some.
had them either, and I don't know about
No
Deb.
one did.
These are just like historical things we've always put aside
That's
money
why a lot
for.
of these have been phased out.
Some of them are not, like the lake water quality. This is the Sebago Lakes, Little Sebago Lake Watershed Association. We support their milfoil mitigation work. A couple years ago we did fund an increase in that for their repair of their dam, and that went up. But
That was a little bit.
but was that was supposed to come back down after? I thought it came back down last year, and I'm
Which one are you
feeling
looking at?
the lake water quality. I'm assuming that's
Yeah,
what
that was
is.
a one-time.
But that seems high to me. But maybe it's
Yeah, I was wondering what was included in that myself.
right because if it's still including the dam repair, that was a one-time
Right.
1-year expense, so it shouldn't. I'm not sure it should be quite that high anymore.
I think you can take it off actually, because it was just a one-time.
Yeah.
Well, but it did include milfoil mitigation, which we continue
In
to
the-
support also, I
Oh,
believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the weeks ahead, we can try to do some research on some of these, but also some of them might be better fit in departments that they support.
Yeah.
under like a membership section of a department budget. For instance, the Southern Maine Agency on Aging, Maine Health Care at Home, Day One, those kind of support our fire and rescue personnel because they respond to situations that we may not. The same thing with Through These Doors, they support law enforcement and public
Opportunity
safety.
Alliance.
You know, some of those might be best fit in specific departments, and we could maybe get rid of or reduce this budget
Right. You
significantly.
said you moved the chamber line, but I'm still seeing it here.
It's still listed there.
Okay.
The document update that I sent out today should have included the change.
Oh, I'm looking at the one on the
Yeah.
website. Okay.
So I apologize for that.
That's fine.
But so we'll include that in the memberships portion of the economic development
Okay.
budget.
And then one note I wanted to make about the Charles Barker Scholarship line. That was a scholarship that, I believe this was supposed to be a one-time refunding of the principal for that scholarship. And so we don't need to have that as a line item again. Are you remembering that way,
Yes.
Dan? Yeah.
We have a couple of, there's a Grange, there's more skeletons in the closet,
Yeah.
to be found.
We've
the
seen
great-
them poking out.
Yes, yeah, you can't put a spade in the ground, I don't think, in mine. But anyways, I'm in complete agreement with your original thought, which is if they don't contact us, then we don't make the payment. I think that it has been the council's tradition over the years that for some of these, that people were certain, like hospice and some of the others that we knew provided services in town, the council wanted to support that. But I think we do need to weed through it, the list. And it's just one of those things that, no one had time to get to, understandably.
Yeah, but if you add it all up, it's not insignificant. So I think we should revisit it.
No, but I think there's a case to be made of the, if folks in town want to give to the Red Cross, folks in town can give to the Red Cross. I've always felt a little uncomfortable taking tax money from people and dishing it out to
Private
certain,
nonprofits.
yeah, to
Right.
organizations like this. So we're completely on the same page.
I think
On this one.
to your point though, if they're an organization that provides direct services to our community and also partners with some of the work we're already doing, I think it does make sense.
You won't get my vote for it, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's been the logic all around.
Yeah, but I don't think all of these organizations do that. I think some of them are just donations, and so that's why we should probably revisit.
I think if you maybe just contacted them all and say, this is gonna be our process, from now on, you need to request it, just so they know that, and then if we hear from them.
So do you want to do some weeding? Do you want me to
Yes.
try to do some weeding this year? And then whatever we can't get to the bottom of, we can maybe keep it in the budget, and then throughout the fiscal year, we'll establish a process or eliminate the process.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
know that's kind of a little bit of a lift, but I think
No, I
if
think
we
it's-
could get a little bit, a handle on it more than we have in the past this year, I think it would be beneficial going forward, yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
And then maybe if we narrow it down and maybe disperse some to other budgets that are more appropriate, maybe the Blueberry Festival one, we can bring that into like recreation or something like that.
Yeah, something it aligns better with.
It best fits.
Yeah,
with
it's not really a community service organization, it's something we support as a town municipal
Yeah.
event, so.
And maybe as we work to refine the committee name for that and the community day, maybe it's a community events committee or something
Something
like
Where
that.
did
Yeah.
you put the other Blueberry expenses?
There's no other Blueberry expenses
Oh, there
anywhere.
aren't.
They were spread all over. And so we tried to aggregate them here.
But you had a revenue line.
But
that
we
was
made a
in-
revenue line.
Yeah.
Okay,
That kind of offsets this.
Yeah.
Because they have revenues associated with it as well.
yep.
So I think as the festival grows, there may be an opportunity for it to make money to help fund future events. And we can better account for that in the future. And maybe it should establish its own nonprofit, or maybe we could get the chamber to take it over or something like that.
Well, your details line in law enforcement, when I read that, my immediate thought was the Blueberry Festival, because
No.
that was an issue that we had last year.
Right, so does this 15.5, I'm sorry, the Blueberry Fest, 15,000 include additional funding for
Yeah, we were gonna, in any expenses directly associated, this was our best guess, because we don't know what exists. Overtime for public safety personnel, law enforcement, public works personnel, facilities personnel, recreation personnel.
That's all in this number?
Yeah, that's where we're a starting point, based on pieces I pulled from different places. I think some of them were just accounted for in the general budget, facilities, public
They
works.
just got absorbed.
Yeah,
But we
so
are gonna
It
go
is an accounting challenge, but where it only happens once a year, we can, that payroll week, we can account for,
Okay.
the staff support.
So that was gonna be my follow-up. Yeah, are we going this year in particular and going forward, we will try to account for those actual expenses so we have a better sense of how to budget for this
Yes.
going forward? Okay. Yeah.
This is just a guess that we kind of put
Sure.
out there. If we end up spending 18,000, then we'll know that 18,000 is where we should be at, or 20,000.
Well, at least we're a lot closer to where we should be than zero, so, which was definitely not
Yeah,
realistic.
we had a zero
Yeah,
budget.
yeah, that was,
And they spent $7,800, so.
Right.
From where that came from, I don't know.
It's not a guess, it's an informed estimate.
Yes.
Yeah. okay. Any other thoughts, from anyone on community services?
No.
Okay, we're actually finished a little bit early. So we will meet next, for a workshop next Tuesday, the 19th, starting at 5:30.
Yep.
And we will continue with this work. We'll be reviewing rather, library, recreation, law enforcement, public safety, public works, transfer station, facilities and parks, and the CIP. So come prepared, because those are some meaty
Yeah.
departments. I want to just thank staff and Justine in particular for putting this all together
Yes.
with Mike. It certainly was very well presented and organized, and I
you.
appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much.
Sorry for the changes on the fly.
No,
Okay.
We've had to do
We-
a lot in a short period of time, yeah.
Yeah. So
Really
we will,
appreciate it.
we
that
yeah,
you've been able
definitely.
to put this together in such a clear way.
Yeah. Okay, so we will adjourn at 9:27 PM. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Very good.